Since when did you become such an expert on robbery?
It's not the robbery he's an expert on. It's the rage. That's some good rage.
That's some good screenwriting. Greetings, friends. Welcome back to Critically Acclaimed, the film review podcast where highbrow and lowbrow collide. They collide very casually this week.
Yeah, it's pretty chill. Thanks, Explosion. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Explosion sound effect that we mix in later. My name is Whitney Seibold. I am a film critic for various bits of the internet, various back corners of the internet. I don't have a cool nickname, just read my stuff. And you are?
My name is William Bibiani. I am also a film critic for the internet. You can read my work at The Wrap, at IGN.com, and of course at criticallyacclaimed.net, where we link to our work throughout the internet and also produce original content as well. Everybody calls me Bibs.
Produce original content has a weird biological sound to me.
Shut up.
Like it's something like a little tardigrade would sort of, it was split off of a tardigrade and become a new being. That's what producing original content evokes in my mind. Maybe I'm the weird one.
Dude, this week on Critically Acclaimed, we're reviewing Skyscraper, Hotel Transylvania 3 Summer Vacation, 8th Grade, Don't Worry He Won't Get Far on Foot, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and Siberia. We're also doing a big double feature with one of the most notorious films of the 1990s, Color of Night.
Color of Night was a big deal when it came out just because of how sexy it was.
Yeah, even though the movie was terrible, everyone seemed to agree, but it's pretty sexy.
Well, there's a lot of nudity anyway. I'm not sure about sexy.
Maxim declared the sex scenes in Color of Night. This is many years ago, but it declared the sex scenes in Color of Night to be the sexiest sex scenes in movie history.
And nobody knows sexy sex scenes better than Maxim magazine.
Yeah, if Mr. Skin had a print publication, it would be Maxim.
If Mr. Skin had a print publication, but it was somehow like more exploitive, that would be Maxim.
Oh.
Or maybe that would be Stuff. There were like even sleazier versions of those lad mags.
Agreed.
They're all kind of gone now, aren't they? There was like a wave there in the 2000s, and then they kind of faded.
Maxim was like the PG-13 Playboy.
Yeah.
Like it was sexy, but it wasn't actually pornographic. But the attitude was a little skeevy.
Sleazy magazine.
Yep. A lot of people read that magazine. Now we read the internet and we listen to podcasts like this one. So enjoy. We're going to be talking about Color of Night.
Sleazy podcasts about sleazy movies. Like Color of Night. And we're pairing it with something that is sexy but not sleazy.
No. Actually, uses sex to tell a great story.
Like one has, like they both have really, really steamy sex scenes, but only one of them is actually adult.
Yeah, and actually, for mature people, you might actually enjoy a good story. Interesting, that dichotomy. We'll talk about that later in the program. Before we get into it, if you aren't watching the movie Trivia Schmoedown, you picked a hell of a week to not watch. Because this has been a hell of a week. I had my
for
big...
you.
For me and others.
In particular, because...
And others. Well, I had a contenders match against Jeff the In-Snyder, which went really badly for Jeff. And really well for me. So if you ever wanted to see someone get, destroyed so hard in a movie trivia game show that they lose the will to go on, that would be my match with Jeff. And you can enjoy that.
At some point, it was just about a runaway, and he just said, forget this.
He just laid down his king. He was just like, yeah, we're good.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
You got me trapped. There's nothing I'm doing here.
So I'm super excited for my upcoming match, and I just want to say, if you've been following my career, I've had a lot of lows. So it's nice to have some highs, and I just feel like, the Bibiani luck might finally be turning. I've got a pretty straight shot. You and me, we're kicking butt on.
We've had a few victories in a row now, and so I don't want to, I want to knock wood a little bit, try to, not put a curse on it. But we've been doing pretty well.
It just felt like nothing could derail us until, oh crap, actually something derailed us. Damn you, Collision. Because Collision, they revealed they're actually going to split up all the teams.
Yeah.
We're going to end up with random people.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure how it's selected, if it's cruelty or if it's randomness, but...
is there anyone you particularly want to end up with? besides me, and I
was
be
about
too
to say,
offended.
wouldn't it be great if they just paired us back up together?
It would be nice.
I don't think they do it that way.
I think the odds are slim, even if it's completely random.
If it's completely random, I think they take each other's names out of the hat. Like we were not allowed to be.
I don't know how it works.
Again.
My point is, who do you want to end up with?
Either Grey Drake or Matt Atchity. I know we just beat them, but I have faith in their powers. And I think I could do well with either of them.
Nice. Listen, they're titans in the league, and I sure would like to end up with Dan Murrell. Or even after his not so great return.
I would love like Brian Chandler or Rachel Cushing. These the champions, but the chances of me getting an actual champion are pretty low.
I don't know. We'll find out, won't we? So stay tuned because it's gonna be weird, and I'm really wondering what this is gonna do to everyone's fantasy leagues. Like, we have this team, and wait, how are we gonna? This team didn't exist before like a day ago or whatever. So here's but the good news is that
it's gonna be like that scene in The Running Man where like that one guy in the back's like, how fast is Buzzsaw gonna kill him? Is it gonna be Dynamo? And somebody just raises their hand and says, I want it to be Richard Kimball.
Sit down.
Sit. And then somebody else in the back says, yeah, $10 on Kimball, or whatever his name was in The Running Man.
Richard Kimball was
that was Kindergarten Cop.
No, that was a fugitive. John Kimball was Kindergarten Cop. Like, the fugitive's name is Dr. Richard Kimball.
The Fugitive.
Go get him.
Remember when Arnold Schwarzenegger played The Fugitive?
That would have been a hell of a movie.
That was a great movie.
But the good news is that I still have my title shot against Sam Levine. Nothing's getting in the way of that. So the Bibiani luck still might shift in a positive direction. We're feeling pretty good.
Bibbs, you're my friend.
Yeah.
I have a lot of faith in you. You know a lot of trivia.
Thank you.
But if I'm putting money down, I'm putting it on Sam.
Take
no offense.
Oh, no. Sam is a formidable opponent, and he's kicked my butt before. So we'll see how it goes. Let's review some movies.
Let's do that. Several came out.
Let's talk about the big ones. Let's talk about Skyscraper. Literally quite huge. It's a skyscraper.
It is a big one.
Set in the world's tallest building, completely fictional version of it.
Skyscraper slipped through a membrane in the space-time continuum from 1995 and landed onto the screens in 2008 with updated special effects. And it feels exactly like that. It feels like an unashamed, unironic, completely non-self-aware Die Hard knockoff.
From the 90s.
From the 90s.
Yeah, this is like a more expensive, but about on the same level of quality and sanity, sudden impact. Or Under Siege 2 Dark Territory.
I would compare it to something like Eraser. Like an efficient, pretty good action film with a big star, has really big set pieces. You see it, you don't remember much about it. You don't remember much about the story.
I remember when Arnold Schwarzenegger shot an alligator and said, "Your luggage."
Your luggage.
Yeah.
And the only thing I really remember about Eraser was the scandal.
The scandal?
The evil mega corporation within the movie was called Cyrex. And evidently that was also the name of a wristwatch company, and they didn't check that. So they shot the entire movie. They had these big logos in the background. All the characters were talking about Cyrex. And then a real company called Cyrex said, hey, wait a minute. That's our company. You can't use our name. The day before it was going to open. And so it didn't open Friday morning. They had to wait until Friday night because the studio panicked and they had to re-edit the film at within a course of a couple hours. They had to use a little bit of CGI to alter the logo so it said Cyrez. And I'm not sure if they got the same actors back. Probably not. They just got some other...
it's not like they say the name every minute.
Some looping, but every time they said it, they had to say Cyrez. So if you watch Eraser, you'll notice they say Cyrez.
Nice. I remember the bit when Arnold Schwarzenegger gets thrown out of an airplane. And
his chute doesn't open.
And the chute doesn't open, but then when he finally does get a parachute, he still manages to shoot the pilots of the airplane when they turn around to ram him.
Yeah, they fly back down while he's falling because they want to fly into midair.
I was going to say it. Eraser isn't bad, and neither is Skyscraper.
Yeah.
This is the kind of
they're completely comparable.
If you've never seen Eraser and the stuff we just said about Eraser makes it that sounds kind of cool. Skyscraper's the movie for you. Yeah. It stars Dwayne Johnson as an FBI hostage specialist.
No, he was like a SWAT guy.
He was like a SWAT guy, but he was also on a hostage team.
He was naval. He was because he met Neve Campbell because she was a naval doctor.
Well, whatever. Anyway, he's
like some sort of naval
he's a
officer.
special agent with the military. In the beginning of the movie, there's a horrible accident or a horrible, mistake in the field, and he gets his leg blown off. And then we cut to a couple of years later. He has married his doctor, played by Neve Campbell. They have a couple of kids.
That's too much pretty in one couple. That's a damn attractive couple.
I like that they're about the same age, which is really rare in a Hollywood movie. She has a good character. I mean, it's not like she's the star, but like she's not just a damsel in distress. She actually has personality and interests and a job.
It's an underwritten role, but she does get to play an active role in some of like the police procedural part of the movie, and Neve Campbell is
great.
A cognizant enough actress to do something with that.
She's really
make her seem like a real person.
She's really talented, and she's someone who I always wish we see more of. Like, I don't understand why she's not in more movies, and hopefully this will raise her visibility and give her more parts.
Maybe a little bit.
So Dwayne Johnson has a prosthetic leg, and he has kind of removed himself from that world. He now works in security, not unlike Ant-Man in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and he has just gotten a really big job checking all of the security for the world's new largest building called the Pearl, which is in Hong Kong. And it has like an indoor tropical forest.
Like 30 stories of the middle of this 212-story building. Over 200-story building. Like 30 of the floors are just like a big arboretum.
Yeah.
And there's a mall on the bottom third of the building.
Right.
And the top 2/3 are currently vacant because it still needs to pass like security clearance so people can live there.
They're giant outdoor turbines that I guess keep it like self-sufficient for power. And at the top floor, there's a fucking holodeck.
There's a gigantic sphere perched on the top of this building, and there's a holodeck inside.
So every single thing we talked about just now, which we see at the beginning of the movie, will be important later, and Dwayne Johnson will probably have to punch it in some way.
Die Hard it's one of those gold...
Why do you bring up Die Hard? Is it relevant in some way?
I can't really see why. It's one of those gold standard screenplays. You know, if you're a Hollywood screenwriter or an aspiring Hollywood screenwriter, watch Die Hard a bunch. This is not my advice. This comes from other screenwriters. And the whole deal with Die Hard is that every little tiny detail that's introduced early in the movie has some sort of payoff or connection later on in the movie.
And it feels organic in Die Hard. Like, it doesn't feel like it's forced. It feels like it just happens to be
why is
important.
John McClane barefoot throughout the movie? Well, it turns out a guy in the plane right in the first scene says, well, if you're stressed out about flying, take off your shoes and like sort of rub your feet against a carpet, and that makes you feel better. Turns out that's all right. And he does that right when the action begins, so he's barefoot, and that increases the action. All these tiny little details come into play. It's a really, really great screenplay. Some screenplays can do it. White House Down does it.
Yes, it does.
The fact that the girl is aspiring on the flag team comes into play later on during the climax.
She saves the world with a flag twirling routine, and that is not an exaggeration. White House Down kicks butt. I don't care what anyone says. And Skyscraper does it too, but it's really blunt about it.
It's blunt and it's really simple. There's not a lot of wit or humor in Skyscraper. It's just light. And I appreciate that much, but it's not much beyond that.
The tone in this is very much not... White House Down is a little cornier than this, but... It's got that Fast and Furious tone, where everything's going to be a little broader, the action's going to be a little crazier, and we're not going to apologize for that. The original Die Hard, is relatively plausible as an action movie.
Yeah.
There's stuff that couldn't happen, but it's just riding the edge of plausibility. Skyscraper jumps over the side, but it just expects you to jump with it and take it as seriously as Skyscraper's taking it. And I like that. So he's the security guy at this place. Turns out the guy who got him the gig, who used to work with them, played by Pablo Schreiber from The Wire and American Gods. He's actually in on a scheme to set the entire building ablaze and steal something important from it. Dwayne Johnson
in the panic.
Yeah, Dwayne Johnson is outside the building, but his family is inside the building when all of this goes down. And so he has to, in what may be the best action sequence of the summer, scale a 90-story skyscraper in about under 10 minutes by jumping every time. And then when he's done, he's not even winded. And then he has to jump from the sky crane to the building.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
land on with his hands on a window, and it's fine. It's not even that hard for him. He's a little sweaty. That's about as far as it goes.
Well, and that's the thing. Dwayne Johnson, you look at him in real life and he looks superhuman. You believe anything he can do on screen, no matter even with aid of special effects. So yeah, if he's sprinting along the top of a crane and just takes a flying leap for a burning building, you think, yeah, he can do that.
He ad-libbed that on the day.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I have an idea. How about I just leap? We got special effects and stuntmen. No, I can do it. All right. How about a safety net, if you like?
Yeah. It just wastes time.
Okay, put it up. I know, insurance, but yeah, I'll just do it.
And then he ends up going from floor to floor
as the building is increasingly burning,
rescuing his kids, fighting bad guys. That's the whole movie. That's the whole movie. Yeah. And you know what? It's a good movie.
And there's not a lot, there's no twist or double back or...
There's one guy who turns out he was evil the whole time. It's obvious.
It's pretty
from the beginning. We find out a little bit more about why they're doing what they're doing, but even that's pretty random.
Noah Taylor, he's a British actor, plays the guy who built the buildings. He plays his right-hand man, and he looks like the devil in this.
Well, he's played Hitler before. He's just one of those guys. If you put him in a movie and you put him in this role, you think to yourself,
he played Hitler in that movie, Max.
Later.
Yeah, the young Hitler in that movie.
It's in Last Action Hero. He played Salieri. Of course, F. Murray Abraham's going to be the bad guy. It's really super predictable.
When it goes up in flames, this guy leans in. He's like, "Well, the building's on fire. I guess you have to evacuate now." It's and the guy kind of looks at him. He's like, "No, I'm not going to." Really? Why aren't you going to evacuate? Please, evacuate. He's like Starscream in sort of how subtle he is. It's insane.
Skyscraper has fallen. I'm the tallest building in the world now.
So that it turns out that guy turns out to be evil. No.
What I think is interesting is that the movie expects you to treat the characters kind of seriously and care about Dwayne and Nev and the kids aren't very annoying, so I'm okay with them.
They're kind of non-entities.
They're non-entities, but they're not annoying. There's no point to just leave them. We've all watched movies where the kid characters are so underwritten or poorly acted that you just don't care if they save them after a while.
Yeah.
The kids are fine. Nev Campbell is great. Dwayne Johnson is great. You like them all. You want them to survive. That's kind of all you need. What I almost admire about this movie, and I never thought I'd say this, is its stubborn resistance to having a point. You would think, when you think about...
There's some sort of comment about greed or ambition.
Look,
they even start up with a montage of newscasters kind of describing this building to us.
Yeah.
And they have this pseudo-poetic thing about the Tower of Babel, and everybody wants to touch the heavens. And so surely then this film is going to be about hubris. No, actually, the guy who built the building's the good guy.
Yeah,
he's okay in all of this.
It's a very interesting, very 21st century capitalist approach to the Tower of Babel, which is the problem wasn't the tower. The problem is the
financiers.
The problem is that the people who ruined it for everybody else. It's an interesting approach. It would be like if the moral of James Cameron's Titanic was, well, they couldn't swim. And you're just that's an interesting take.
James Cameron said this in an interview somewhere. It's what was the problem with the Titanic? Hubris. We thought we could conquer nature and we built this thing that was too big. And he would have shot back with, no, it wasn't big enough. If they had made a bigger iceberg-proof boat, then everyone would have been okay.
Yeah, there's something just so blissfully simple about this movie, and the fact that they're not taking it so seriously, that the fact that there isn't anything resembling a message is not really a problem.
This is exactly the kind of film you talk about when you say, I need to get inside out of the heat for 2 hours and a theater is air conditioned.
Yeah.
And I need something to be happening on a screen in front of me that, makes me maybe feel something, but maybe not. Will just sort of distract me.
Yeah.
It's a 3-star movie. We'll never be beyond that. Was it you who coined the phrase the 4-star, 3-star movie?
Yeah, it's a 4-star, 3-star movie.
Yeah, it's that kind of movie.
Yeah,
it will
exactly
never, ever be higher than 3 stars.
But it won't ever be lower than 3 stars either. And that's, for me, the definition of a 4-star, 3-star movie, which is, there's really nothing wrong with it. It's just, it was not designed to be great.
I'm going to figure out what I think about how Skyscraper stands in a couple months' time, and if I've forgotten entirely about it, or if I'm still sort of thinking about little details like Eraser.
Perhaps.
Will it stay in the Eraser school, or will it fade from memory?
I wonder, though, sometimes about, like, because we saw Eraser when we were younger, and we were absorbing things a little bit more fully. We had fewer distractions in our lives.
Yeah.
We had seen fewer movies. We'd still seen tons of movies, but we'd seen fewer.
Smartphones weren't a thing yet.
Yeah. So, like, we were, you know, when you watch a movie like Skyscraper when you're 12... which is a perfect target demo for it.
Yeah.
Is it going to implant itself just in the way that Eraser did, where it's just like somewhere it's never going to go away. I do have memories of Eraser.
Some.
And then that's it. Like, it's not going to build my life around it. I'm not going to use a character's name as my online avatar. Just, I do remember Eraser. I wonder if that's Skyscraper for a new generation.
Details are coming back. So he erased, like, he hid people who were being hunted down by criminals.
Yeah, like he was part of the witness protection program.
And was it Oliver Platt he hid in the gay bar?
No, it was a guy who looks like Oliver Platt. It was the guy,
a guy who looks like Oliver Platt.
It was like the British Oliver Platt.
Okay, I remember that, like, he got him a job as a bartender in a gay bar, knowing that there would be no, like, mean Italian gangsters going in there.
Robert Pastorelli, not British.
Robert Pastorelli, okay.
Not British.
The guy who I thought was Oliver Platt.
He looks like Oliver Platt. See, you tried to deny it. He looks like Oliver Platt.
That's my memory of Eraser. Like, I know that one vague plot detail, but I can't remember the actor who was in that scene.
I was thinking of a young Robbie Coltrane. That's who I thought he was. But yeah, no, it was Robert Pastorelli. But no, there was a good cast. There was James Cromwell, James Coburn, James Caan, Vanessa Williams.
I remember Vanessa Williams.
Right?
Yeah.
It was a... We should do a whole episode about Eraser now.
We need to go back. We need to see what Eraser does to us in 2018.
I love how, like, the whole point of Eraser is to erase everyone's memory of something. We'll never forget Eraser. Let's move on. The other big release this weekend is Hotel Transylvania 3 Summer Vacation, which I saw and you didn't.
I sadly did not, because I'm a fan of these movies.
Yeah, actually, Whitney and I are both, like a lot of critics. We're not big fans of a lot of the films Adam Sandler has been doing for reasons we've discussed time and time again. A lot of his live-action comedies feel a little lazy to us, and they tend to rely on...
Lazy and mean.
Yeah, there's a lot of rely on bullying-type jokes, and I just don't think they're funny, fair enough. Hotel Transylvania, on the other hand, is actually, like, consistently funny. The first movie was a very surprising treat.
It was frantic. It was hard to take. I didn't have enough sugar in my blood to really properly absorb Hotel Transylvania, but I really admire its ambition.
It was very energetic. It's a story of Count Dracula who, after being persecuted for centuries by humans, decides to build a resort for monsters to get away from it all and feel safe and secure and be pampered a bit. He has a daughter named Mavis. She falls in love with the human. That leads to conflict, and eventually they get married.
A rogue backpacker who has found this hotel, and he's like Brad Pitt's character in Burn After Reading. Is just always up. He just happens like, oh, cool, monsters. He's never scared of anything.
Yeah, he seems like a nice dude. So Mavis and Johnny, I think, get married. The next movie, they have a son. The second movie is really funny. The plot doesn't really work too well because it's this weird thing about Dracula trying to make sure his son is like a vampire.
His grandson.
His grandson is a vampire, and it's just kind of like bungles the message about like having different backgrounds in the same family, and it's just kind of weird about it. But it's never really bad. It just doesn't really have anything great to say about that.
The strength of these movies, though, is they really cracked the whip on the visual gags.
Yes.
Like, this is like Tex Avery with a few extra gobstoppers in your mouth. The first film was directed by Genndy Tartakovsky.
They're all directed by Genndy Tartakovsky.
Oh, they're all directed. Okay. Yeah. Genndy Tartakovsky, who got his start in some really, really impressive cartoons from the Cartoon Network, like Samurai Jack, I think is the most notable.
Dexter's Lab.
But he also did Dexter's Laboratory.
Yeah.
Really, like, broadly stylized animated characters, a lot of blocky designs, a lot of, like, boldly 2D design, really sharp edges on a lot of his animation, which is really retro. It goes back to stuff like Rocky and Bullwinkle, and also feels really modern because they're updating a lot of sort of some tropes that were already laid down by stuff like the Ren and Stimpy show.
I had Genndy Tartakovsky on a podcast once, and we had like a whole hour-long conversation, and he was really cool. And One of the things he talked about was his sort of philosophy with CG animation. A lot of filmmakers, when they're making a CG film, even brilliant CG films, tend to think of it as creating a reality within a computer.
Yeah.
So these are the character models, and this is just what they look like, and then we just move them around like puppets. And he doesn't have that philosophy.
He described them as puppets. Like when you're putting on a puppet show and you can't do with a puppet what you can do with a cartoon. Cartoon you can do anything with.
Yeah, so Genndy Tartakovsky, even in CG animation, really wants his characters to be extremely elastic. If you look at the early Looney Tunes cartoons frame by frame, you'll see some really incredibly strange frames of just trying to capture huge emotions and broad, wild physical comedy.
Especially if you
watch, the eye can barely register.
If you look up the cartoons, specifically the ones directed by Bob Clampett, he was the one who just. If you remember any Bugs Bunny cartoons where he seemed like really wrinkly and panicked and ugly, those are Bob Clampett cartoons, and those are some of the best ones.
Yeah. So the Hotel Transylvania movies are kind of inherently funny, and the third one is no exception. The plot for all of them is kind of lame, especially the second one, but it's all just an excuse to get to some really, really great gags. There are... I can't remember the last time a funny walk made me laugh out loud. And Hotel Transylvania 3 has several of them. Just the way Dracula walks down the patio of a cruise ship just made me laugh just because the body language was really hilarious. So the plot of this one is Dracula is lonely. His daughter is married. He puts on weddings at the hotel. His wife has been dead for hundreds of years,
several centuries,
and he's just kind of lonely. His daughter
and all the other monsters have wives or girlfriends or partners.
Mostly,
even the Blob inadvertently spawned in the previous movie,
and this one as well. So he's lonely. Mavis misinterprets this as work-related stress. So she decides she's going to surprise him with a cruise, a monsters-only cruise, to the lost city of Atlantis, starting from the Bermuda Triangle, going to the lost city of Atlantis.
Love it. Okay.
It's kind of funny. And to the movie's credit, the first thing Dracula says when he finds out what the plan is, you took us to a hotel.
I run a hotel.
It's a floating hotel. I run this. No, you don't run this one. But I live in a hotel. It's not really that weird. But then Dracula actually...
But also, he's a vampire. You're going to take him on, a cruise out in the sun? Surely he's going to spend most of his time below decks.
Well, half of it.
Oh, I guess so.
Well, it's just like anything else, If people sleep at night, he sleeps during the day. It's fine. And Dracula changes his mind when he meets the captain, whose name is Erica. He's voiced by Catherine Hahn, an actress who I just genuinely think is
Catherine
really funny.
Yeah.
And he gets a crush on her. And
is she a monster or a human?
She's a human, but as we learn very quickly and is super obvious, even if you are behind, even if you are not whatever,
don't pick up on it.
Yeah. Her last name is Van Helsing. So
Erica Van Helsing.
So she has lured all of the monsters there to their doom, and in particular, she has a grudge against Dracula. While Dracula has a crush on her and he's trying to date her, she's constantly trying to kill him. So it's like Wile E. Coyote if the Roadrunner had a crush on the coyote.
Oh, it sounds like Pepe Le Pew, really.
Yeah. It's a funny premise. And whenever it just focuses on that, is really great. It's just the only thing that kind of keeps this movie from being great is the plot beyond that setup, which is just a setup for one great almost killing Dracula gag after another. The plots are barely there. The reality that they've created for this monsters have this thing called a zing, which is imprinting on someone automatically. It's a biological love at first sight imperative. And the more
I thought that was just a definition for falling in love at first sight, just a poetic way of putting it.
No, they make it literal. They clarify very specifically.
So stupid.
Yeah, they clarify very specifically that it's literal, and it kind of raises a bunch of questions that the movie kind of doesn't want to answer about so you have all these messages about how all these monsters are the same, man. It doesn't matter if you're a human or a vampire, but everyone seems to end up with the same kind of monster, or if they don't, the exact same body type. Like, there's a couple other people that Dracula like almost dates, but they
they're
don't
also
look
vampire-ish.
No, like one of them's like a witch and isn't conventionally attractive. One of them is part Frankenstein and she's like stronger than the average woman. And Dracula like rejects them out of hand, and it's just like they seem okay. Like,
seems like the Adam Sandler influence.
A little bit, and that's really frustrating. And it's not the focus, but like it's just like this little tiny undercurrent of this thing that like just doesn't feel like they thought it out, or if they did, they thought it out bad.
I understand there needs to be like a montage of like potential mates that he has to reject for some reason. But yeah, if the only reason you reject somebody is they're stronger than the average woman, then that's not much of a reason.
One of the things that surprises me, and I think would surprise a lot of people about a lot of the people who work on major movie franchises or animated universes, is how much more thought the fans put into it than the creators.
Yeah.
We had the writers of Deadpool on the show, and we talked about a lot of the continuity problems throughout the whole X-Men series.
Right.
And which they took in stride, and they just said, we're not super concerned because there are continuity problems in the comics anyway. We don't care if we rewrite the history of a character as long as in our movie the character is cool.
Yeah.
They care less than the fans do, and whether that's right or wrong, so be it. I've interviewed the people behind the Cars movies. And the Cars movies make no sense.
They make sense if it's like thousands of years in the future and the post-apocalypse came, and it's like the Terminator. The machines took over.
Why are the eyes the windshields and not the headlights? Is there just gooey brain in there? If you opened the door, would there be like guts spilling out?
Yeah.
Like, how does this, like, why are certain things cars and certain things not cars? I don't understand. How do cars even know what certain things are if there were no humans to invent that? They wouldn't need that if cars were the only... It's
leaked down through cultural osmosis.
And I've talked to the people who make Cars movies, and they all say, we try not to think about it.
Don't think about that.
We try not to think about it.
That's the point of these movies.
The logic that they told me was like kids playing with cars as toys.
Yeah.
If it fits that kind of kid reality, we're fine with it, and it seems to work for them.
I have a kid. He loves cars.
Yeah.
He's 3 years old. Cars are his favorite thing.
It's fine.
And when we play Cars, that's what he does. Yeah. They have a personality. They talk to one another as if they're humans.
And when I interviewed Gendy Tartakovsky about something I thought of when I watched Hotel Transylvania, which is Mavis is a vampire, Johnny is a human. Eventually, he's going to die of old age. Will she ever turn him into a vampire? And he was just like, I don't know if we're gonna do that.
And Mavis is already like, it's supposed to be her 18th birthday, but
it's like her 100th.
To stress that she's a vampire. It's her 118th birthday. She's already much older than him.
Yeah, it raises
not age appropriate.
It raises a lot of questions the movie doesn't want to answer, and maybe it's because I'm an adult that I'm asking them, but I'm asking them, and I find it a little distracting. So that takes it down a notch for me, but it's still very, very funny, and it's pretty good for kids. And yeah, I still like these movies, whatever critiques I may have.
I do want to see it. I'm just a big fan of the genre, like kids horror, scary stories for kids. I think kids like being scared, and I'm constantly on the lookout for a good horror film that is, kid appropriate, but still a little scary.
Well, I think kids, and this is just based on my experience as a kid for the most part, I think kids identify with monsters. I think kids
sort of as outsiders. You
a
mean?
Little bit, yeah, because kids are outsiders of society. They're not making the decisions. They're put off to the side. We're kind of hyper aware of the differences between each other. Like, that kid's the really boogery kid who keeps having the runny nose, and we just sort of see like monsters are like cool or whatever like that. And it's like, oh, we're cool. Like everything's cool. Everything's fine.
I think monsters give kids not just sort of that outsider fantasy, but the power fantasy. The same thing that superheroes fulfill. Monsters, are creatures. They play by their own rules. You can't tell you can't tell Dracula to go to bed. So I'm Dracula. I get to be the monster now. So. I think kids are drawn to monsters for that reason, and there's that sort of forbidden aspect to it. They're scary. There's a little bit of death around them, and kids are a little bit drawn to that, a little bit fascinated by this forbidden knowledge.
Well, tell
so
me-
I love the stories about monster stories for kids.
Speaking of kids, a movie that you've called one of the best films of the year opens this week.
That's right.
It is called Eighth Grade, and I know rather little about it other than it is about the 8th grade.
It is about the 8th grade. It is written and directed by Bo Burnham, an adult male who has somehow managed to write one of the single most compassionate and knowing films about teens that I think I've seen in a long time. Maybe since The Spectacular Now? It's difficult to say.
Okay.
Only this is much more of a kind of a kitchen sink, almost realist drama about a young woman named Kayla. She's 13. She's in the 8th grade, and 8th grade is hell because 8th grade is hell. I don't know anybody who looked back on their 13th year and thought, "Wow, that was a good time." It's kind of a miserable time in your life. Everything's really, really difficult. And it takes a look at this young woman named Kayla, played by an actress named Elsie Fisher, who is fantastic. She is a star. Keep an eye on her. And how she traverses just how horrible and difficult everything is, and how big everything really feels. She's not popular. She has a vlog that she works on, and she gives it on her vlog advice on how to be a better friend and be strong and to stand up for yourself. And, she has her own sign-off. She says, Gucci.
Like the clothes.
Like the clothes. Gucci, and she gives an A-OK sign. When in real life, she doesn't follow her own advice. She is timid, she is shy, she is unpopular. You can tell how awkward she feels in every scene. This film is very, very skilled at putting the camera right at a 13-year-old's eye level. I've seen a lot of films about teens where it kind of the camera takes sort of an Olympian approach, not like high angles or anything. Just it's a film about teens for an adult audience.
Yeah.
And it's meant to sort of evoke nostalgia for being young rather than really kind of trying to capture what it is to be that age.
Well, and I think that's just a natural extension of the fact that the people who make movies are adults.
Are adults,
yeah,
but
it happens.
It's rare that a filmmaker will actually try to capture what the feelings are in that situation.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, like filmmakers like Harmony Korine can do that really well, but they capture this really dark cartoon world of sex and violence. This is much more average. It's really plain. Kayla lives with her single dad. We don't learn for a long time what happened to mom, but she's not around.
Right.
Dad can never say the right thing, but not in that sort of goofy, embarrassing way. Just they don't connect. They've sort of lost their ability to talk to one another. They still, live together. They still love one another, but there's just nothing for them to talk about.
Right.
She's invited to a popular girls' party. She doesn't want to go because she knows she's not welcome. And the difficulty of simply putting on a swimsuit and walking to the pool and facing these other kids is kind of like going into a dragon's lair for poor Kayla. There's a few dramas along the way. She has a crush on a hot boy. She tries to approach this hot boy in the only language she knows how, in kind of the modern teen parlance. Sort of in communicating through Instagram comments, first of all. That's the way she gets her personality to sort of flex itself. But also, she understands the only way to sort of get a 13-year-old boy's attention is to use sex and sex slang. Mm-hmm. And she approaches one of these hot boys with, saying, "Oh, no, I have, these nudie pictures on my phone. You can't see them, but I have these on my phone." And that's what sort of gets him interested in her. And it's this kind of horrific dance that she doesn't want to engage in, and takes all of this sex talk and tries to make it seem really sort of natural, and she's clearly really uncomfortable. At one point in the movie, she looks up, "How do you give a good blowjob?" Because she knows this is a thing. This is part of the conversation. And we see kind of her face as she's looking up this information, and it's way too much information for her.
Yeah, she's
there. Not comfortable at all with any of this level that she's expected to be on. How a male comedian has come out of his previous field and moved into filmmaking and made a film that is so knowing and so compassionate about teen girl life is kind of baffling and strangely extraordinary. Because I haven't seen, like I said, I haven't seen films that are this humane and this knowing and this human about teenage life. It's really, really rare that one of these comes along. And It's really astonishing that Bo Burnham a guy, a white guy in his 20s came forth and made a film like this.
He was 20s, really?
I think he's only like 28 or 29.
Holy shit.
And it just will make you cry. It'll get under your skin. No matter who you are, you'll recognize it. And it's been said, I wrote this in my review, that if you want...
He is 27.
He's 27 years old. Yeah, he's a young guy. If you want to be universal, you need to be more specific.
Yeah, we've said this before.
Yeah, and if you make a movie about sort of like a young girl in India, and you make it very specific about her experience and about the things she goes through day in day, that will somehow reach everyone, because we'll be able to start seeing the similarities between ourselves, no matter what our station and our location, and this character. And I feel that way about Kayla, Elsie Fisher's character. She is living something very specific, suburban teen angst, and yet I think, I'm not a teenage girl, I never was, but I recognize everything she went through and everything she's going through in the modern day, and how everything felt like a triumph and everything felt like a trial, and it was really, really gorgeous. I implore everyone to see this movie. Damn. Take kids to see this movie. Take 12-year-olds to see this movie. Take 15-year-olds to see this movie. Everyone will recognize something from this film, and everyone can get something from this film.
Well, I wish I'd seen that instead of Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot.
Which is a Gus Van Sant film. You'd think there'd be something to it.
He's really hit or miss, though.
It's true, but he's always, well, not always, but he's typically pretty interesting.
He's typically pretty interesting, and I can tell he had some investment in this material, but it ends up feeling pretty Oscar baity in that sort of
this is
big message speeches.
This is
kind of
Hollywood Gus Van Sant, not experimental Gus Van Sant.
More so, anyway. Like the balance is tipped. This is the biographical film about cartoonist John Callahan, who was a recovering alcoholic, who in the midst of a drunken binge, while he was driving with a fellow alcohol enthusiast, there was a horrible accident. His friend walked away mostly unscathed, and Callahan was in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, with no mobility in his legs and extremely limited mobility in his arms. After that, he eventually found his way into Alcoholics Anonymous and dealt with many of his problems, and he also eventually found his way to becoming a rather controversial cartoonist with a gross and sometimes very offensive sense of humor. Some of his comic strips are funny in a way that maybe only he could get away with. The title of the movie refers to a comic strip in which a cowboy and sheriff and his posse are in the desert, and they see an abandoned wheelchair, and the sheriff says, "Don't worry, he won't get far on foot." Which is...
That's a good tasteless joke.
Good, and he can make that joke. He's totally allowed. John Callahan led an interesting life. There's no denying that. He overcame a bunch of stuff. He dealt with a lot of serious problems.
Sounds like he had a good dark sense of humor.
He had well, I don't know about good, but he had a dark sense of humor, and that was worth exploring, and the movie is only interested in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay.
It's really only focused on his experience.
The 12 steps.
Yeah, and that's okay. Like, I'm not... There are critiques of Alcoholics Anonymous. There are also a lot of people whose lives have been dramatically improved by Alcoholics Anonymous. But when the movie feels like a big ad for it, you can't help but start rejecting it after a while, especially when the movie gives a lot of short shrift to everything else going on. Joaquin Phoenix plays John Callahan. He's one of the best actors working today. So he gives a good performance. And all of like the smaller roles in the film, whether they're played by like Udo Kier or some actor you've never seen before, and they just kind of whip out like a great one-scene performance, everyone is doing really good work. Jonah Hill plays Joaquin Phoenix's sponsor, who is this very rich, very hippie, guru-esque guy. And he feels like he's pushing for an Oscar. Like, he does feel like... And I know this sounds like a thing. Like, I know some people complain about this, and some people kind of key into the wavelength I'm getting at here. Oscar bait isn't necessarily bad, but it's a type. There's a way that movies that we see as quote-unquote Oscar bait sort of embrace melodrama.
They sell a certain kind of melodrama.
They embrace melodrama. They have something that seems emotionally heavy, but is actually taking some very simple emotional platitudes over really confronting the material. Like, for example, a good one is...
It's better the more truthful it is, but it's rarely deeply truthful.
Yeah, and you can argue that it's more satisfying the Hollywood way, but you could also argue that you're doing the audience and the subject a disservice. For example, just look at the differences between something like The Theory of Everything, an okay biopic about Stephen Hawking, and the realities of his life and his marriage, and you just see that the movie just really simplified everything. So maybe it's not bad, but they didn't really shoot for the
black hole.
Yeah, they didn't
shoot for the stars, as it were.
They didn't really shoot for the stars. And this one feels like another one of those. This feels like an excuse for Joaquin Phoenix to be really emotionally vulnerable, and for Jonah Hill and a couple other actors to really push him to take personal responsibility for everything he's done with his life. And honestly, even stuff like, oh, so he has a sense of humor and he learned how to draw, which must have been incredibly difficult given his physical circumstances. Most of that happens off camera. Even the sense of humor. Just sort of like, oh, and by the way, he's funny. Is he? When did that happen? He's never made a joke. Like, where does this come from?
What is it about his journey through AA that makes it unique? Because I've seen many, many films about recovery.
As have I.
Yeah, and fictional and true.
Well, and this is sort of the irony where his situation is, in addition to having, sort of baseline abandonment issues, his mother gave him up as a baby, and that's been sort of his go-to woe is me, which he has to confront in Alcoholics Anonymous. But he's also he's physically disabled, and he has a lot of really difficult emotions about that. There's a scene in the movie where he's talking about the bureaucratic difficulty that he goes through as someone who depends on hospitals and healthcare systems in the state, and all of the reasons why they make basically just living his life harder than it needs to be. He's making he's justifiably upset. He's making valid points that no one else in the room can fully understand, and then everyone in the room tells him to shut up and talk about how he needs to take responsibility for how this is his fault. And I'm like, okay, that might be useful for him going through recovery, taking responsibility for his life, not blaming others. He's also making a valid point, and it's a point that you can really make well within this narrative. You could tell that recovery narrative with other life stories. This particular bit of Callahan's life can kind of only be explored in the Callahan story. And that's the part that gets the short shrift. So it ends up feeling very middle of the road. You said yourself, the more specific it feels, the more universal it feels, the more interesting it feels. They make it less specific, even though he had a very specific life, and it just ends up not making an impression. Like, unless they really whip out the Oscar campaign and get a couple of nominations out of this, which I'm sure they're going to try to.
Yeah.
I will forget this movie. I guarantee you. It's not badly made. I think it makes some choices that make it just not make much of a dramatic impact on me. But, it had the opportunity to tell a really distinctive person's life in a really distinctive way, and they found a way that was incredibly simplistic. And, man, that's frustrating. Just really wasn't worth it for me.
That's a pity.
It is a pity. Is Siberia a pity?
Siberia is a pity.
That's too bad.
Siberia is a film from a filmmaker named Matthew Ross, who has previously done a film called Frank and Lola. And both films have kind of the same story, which is why I mention it. Frank and Lola was about a Las Vegas chef played by Michael Shannon, who was really bitter. He was kind of a perfectionist. He was cold in that Michael Shannon sort of way when he was in heavy mode. And he met a younger woman played by Imogen Poots, who is this mysterious young woman with ties to crime.
I really like her. She's an underrated actor.
She's quite a good actress. She's very, very charismatic. I even like her when she shows up in crap like Need for Speed.
She's the best part of that.
Yeah. But it's kind of about how their mutual need for one another is kind of revealing a lot of destructive impulses in them.
Was it their mutual need for speed?
No, it was their mutual need to possess a person.
Speedily?
Sure.
Neat.
I'll have that in your head. That's fine.
I'm working on it.
Siberia, the older man in the question this time, is played by Keanu Reeves, he's 53. He plays a 51-year-old. They do say it in the movie. And he is a like an illegal diamond broker. That's what he does for a living. And rather than him living sort of that globe-trotting, kind of sexy, high-end lifestyle. He does get to spend some time with, in drug parties with gangsters, and he does get to stay in high-end hotels, but you get the impression that his job is really, really boring, and he spends a lot of time just sort of waiting around dingy motels, drinking and not doing anything, waiting for a contact to call for 3 days at a time.
Probably get a lot of reading done with a lifestyle like that.
Yeah, but he doesn't strike me as a very, intellectual type who really wants to delve. He just sits around, he drinks, and...
It's too bad.
He needs an extension on a recent diamond exchange because his connection has gone mysteriously missing. So he says to a Russian gangster, give me 48 hours, I'm going to go to Siberia, find my connection, I'll have your diamonds for you. He goes to Siberia, and there's not a lot to do there. It's not a lot of people there. Seems it's depicted as being quite remote. He spends a lot of time... It's Siberia.
I mean, that's kind of what it's famous for.
I've never been. I'm sure there's plenty going on in Siberia, but in the mind of most people, Siberia is a faraway, remote, very cold place. And it is remote and cold, and he spends a lot of time drinking vodka, and he starts flirting with the proprietress of the local diner, played by an actress named Anna Ularu, who was the Wicked Witch of the West in Emerald City, which I remember from our Canceled Too Soon coverage of that
We
TV
did an
series.
episode of Canceled Too Soon, our podcast where we review TV shows less than one season or less. And on that episode, Rachel the Crusher Cushing was our special guest.
That's right.
It was a fun episode. It was a fun episode.
Talked about Tarsem's series, Emerald City, and the Wicked Witch of the West, who is a good 20 years Keanu Reeves Jr. I'm not sure how old the character is, but the actress is at least 20 years younger than Keanu Reeves. They start having sort of a flirtatious romance that's not really warm. It's just sort of based on mutual attraction and kind of necessity. They're just apathetic and bored with everything that's going on in Siberia. And through their mutual apathy, form a very tight bond. And that's kind of what the movie is about this doomed romance of mutual apathy. And it lasts through about the first 2/3 of the movie. And then they have to do plot. And there's diamonds hidden in certain things, and they have to move diamonds, and they have to pass gangster initiation rites.
This sounds like a Pulp Fiction knockoff from the late 90s. Does it sound like Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, or Truth or Consequences, New Mexico?
It's way more depressive than one of those. Those Pulp Fiction knockoffs were much more lively, and they had kind of eccentric characters. This is really depressive, bored characters, and it's really kind of slow moving.
Is there a point to be made with that? Like, he's got this job that if it was a Jet Li movie, he'd be doing all this cool stuff.
Well,
but now he's depressed. Is there it's like a Melville kind of point to make with that?
There's a version of this which is really plot centric, and it's all about racing around. It's racing against the clock, and you could make it really sort of incident based and plot based, and that would have been a fine fodder for a thriller, depending on how well it was made. You can tell Matthew Ross, who wrote the film as well, is trying to tell a story about an older man. He's also married, by the way. I didn't mention that. How an older married man kind of is at the end of his rope, and that the life of a criminal does lead to this place of apathy where your only hope for human connection is people you might happen to bump into in remote locations. Interesting enough idea for a story had it ridden the romance angle. The problem is it's also a thriller, and it has to end with a gunfight, and it does end with a gunfight. And I don't care about the gunfights. I don't care about the diamond smuggling.
Sounds like they put all the time into the one thing and then just ended with something else.
Yeah,
it's like that one movie with there were two movies about the Lambada. It came out the same day. There was Lambada, and then there was Lambada the Forbidden Dance.
Look up the history of canon if you want to know why those two films were released on the same day.
Same day. Imagine if Olympus Has Fallen
and White House Down
came out on the same day.
Or Deep Impact and Armageddon were released on the same Friday.
They don't do that. But this happened with Lambada and Lambada the Forbidden Dance. One of them...
I think one was just called The Forbidden Dance.
I've heard it both ways. But anyway... One of those Lambada movies ends with a dance competition, or at least a big dance. The other one ends with a math competition.
That's right, and I forgot which was which.
Who remembers? No one remembers.
We need to double feature those two and see if we can tell the difference.
I would love that, but you just... And honestly, the math competition isn't completely dissatisfying, but it's weird.
In a dance movie.
We spent so much time on the dancing. Why is this ending with a math competition?
I love in Step Up 3D. First of all, I love everything about Step Up 3D because it's a perfect movie. It's better than Jaws.
We're not being ironic.
And I'm not being ironic there. There's a conceit that Moose, the main character, has to take an engineering exam, but it's the same night as this big underground dance competition. And what is he going to do? Is he going to take keep up his livelihood and take the engineering exam, or is he going to follow his passion and go to the dance competition? Turns out he can do both, and it's not an issue.
Well, he's late to the dance. And so when he power slides in with his bicycle and he knocks the faucet on the dance floor, he floods the dance floor. And of course, the pirates are able to adapt to a water-based geography more efficiently than the House of Guai. So, and of course, Moose leveled up his water dancing at the end of Step Up to the Street, so it all worked out okay.
Yeah, we got to see the number appear above his head.
But it wasn't easy. That's the important
thing. It was, but it was presented as if it was. It was just, he's taking the exam, he's looking at the clock, and they keep cutting back to the dance competition. Oh no, he's missing the dance competition. And then he just shows up on a bike and some ADR, somebody shouts, "Moose, you made it!" And he just starts dancing.
Look.
And he does both.
Look.
And it's easy.
It was a bit of a rush. That's really difficult.
That's the big drama. He had to hurry there.
Almost missed it.
Almost, yeah, to bike extra fast to get there on time. That's the big drama.
What if he was winded? It could have been bad.
Yeah, it doesn't have any bearing on the dance competition. Him being late ends up helping them.
Speaking of being late to dance competitions, William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream is a play that's about 400 years old.
400 years old.
About a little over 400 years old now.
That one was probably written in 1590 something.
1595, 1596. William Shakespeare, for those of you who don't know,
was an English playwright.
Yeah. You should know this. He wrote Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet and many of the other finest plays ever written. And there was a time...
Why are you telling them who Shakespeare is?
I'm being a little ironic.
Right.
But my point is this. There was this time in like the 90s in particular...
There's a bit of a boom.
There was a really... Making Shakespeare movies was kind of all the rage. And people were making...
Well, it was thanks to Branagh, really. Because in 1989, Kenneth Branagh made Henry V. And it kind of took the indie world by storm.
Yeah.
It was one of the bigger indie hits that kind of kicked off the movement.
All of these scripts are in the public domain. My God.
And Henry V is great. Some people call it his best movie. It's right up there. One of his best.
There's some very
all of his Shakespeare films are good, except for Love's Labour's Lost. That one is a big stinker.
I don't think it's a stinker. I think it is an interesting novelty.
And As You Like It is kind of forgettable, but it's fine.
My point is this: there was this big Shakespeare boom, and some of the renditions were pretty straightforward. Henry V is a really handsome production, but it's Henry V. It's not like they put it in the modern day.
Well, they kind of did, because if you remember, Derek Jacobi played the narrator, and he was dressed in modern dress.
That's the narrator, though. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, but there was also like Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, which was this MTV-ified beach bum version where everyone called their guns swords for reasons.
Swords and daggers.
For reasons.
They took the language of Shakespeare and they kind of tried to turn it into modern things. It's like when somebody said, "Here's my gold," he just held up a big wad of cash, like folding cash.
And I get it. You were trying to like sort of show like sort of the contemporary relevancy of the text. The irony is that Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet has aged way worse than William Shakespeare's. I still kind of like the movie. It's got like an infectious energy to it, but it really feels like a relic of when it was made. Every time you try to contemporize Shakespeare, you run the risk of making something that's kind of like a flashpoint of this exact moment in time, and then 5 years later it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Which brings us to A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Which is exactly what this new Midsummer Night's Dream does.
Yeah, this is a new version from writer-director Casey Wilder-Mott. It is a contemporary retelling of A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is basically a story about a bunch of kids who are in love with each other and run off into the woods and take drugs.
Okay,
that is the Casey Wilder-Mott version.
There's three stories in A Midsummer Night's Dream. There's the mismatched lovers. Two lovers love each other. They run off to the woods because they want to elope. Another man is in love with that woman who has run off, so he goes chasing after her, and yet another woman goes chasing after him.
Yeah.
Helena loves Demetrius. Demetrius loves Hermia. Hermia and Lysander are in love with each other.
Yes, and then they run afoul of a group of mischievous forest sprites, led by King Oberon, who orders his merry mischief maker Puck to find a love potion in the woods, and he's going to use it on his wife, who is spurning him.
He's on the outs with Titania, the fairy queen.
He orders Puck out of a gesture of goodwill, he takes pity on Helena. And he says, give this love potion to Demetrius so that he'll fall in love with Helena, and then everyone ends up happy. Puck screws up and gives the love potion to Lysander, who falls in love with Helena. Then he gives it to
out of love with Hermia.
And then he gives it to Demetrius as well.
So
and
now they're both chasing around Helena, and Helena's not having any of it because she's kind of out of her mind
Hermia,
at this point.
who's used to being the center of the universe, is now on the outs, and everyone's unhappy.
In this version, in most, the script says that Hermia is like a star, and everybody loves her, and Helena's kind of like, I guess, the ugly duckling. That's kind of the only literary parallel. And so in this version, Hermia is played by Rachel Lee Cook.
Of She's All That fame.
And she's depicted as like this big movie star, whereas Helena's like kind of a spooky poetess.
Well, she's a screenwriter.
Who reads her own poetry in like Echo Park clatches.
Yeah.
This is all set very specifically in the hipster community of Los Angeles. And in fact, there's a pan over all of the neighborhoods. There's Echo Park, there's Beverly Hills, there's Venice Beach, and they pan up to the Hollywood sign and it says Athens. That's the level of wit we're dealing with here.
Meanwhile, there's actually a bunch of, in the original play, amateur thespians, amateur theatrical production, trying to put on a serious romantic tragedy called Pyramus and Thisbe, which is not unlike Romeo and Juliet. And the idea
but they're all buffoons.
And they're all buffoons. And honestly, like, Shakespeare presaged the whole idea of so bad it's good with the play in Midsummer Night's Dream, because they're trying to put on this great play. They all don't know what they're doing. They're very sincere, but they don't know what they're doing. And in the end, all the characters watch the play, and the play is hilariously bad.
And they're all congratulated because they did such a bad job.
And in this new version of A Midsummer Night's Dream, they basically play it off as though Pyramus and Thisbe is the new The Room, which is probably the cleverest thing the movie does. I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, that's kind of funny.
This is not the first Shakespeare film adaptation I've seen that treats a play within a play as a film within a film.
No,
because Michael Amelrada's Hamlet did the same thing with The Mousetrap. Hamlet didn't put on a play; he made this creepy student film.
But by creating a direct parallel to an existing like motion picture phenomenon,
I suppose
that feels
so, yeah.
relatively recent. This idea of watching movies because they're bad. Culturally, that's only a few decades old.
Loving a film, ironically, that's true.
Yeah, the idea of that being a socially acceptable phenomenon is only a few decades old. So that feels kind of an amusing sort of turn here. But basically what this ends up feeling like is a bunch of hipsters running around in the woods doing drugs. It feels it feels film school.
I was going to say, it feels like that's what the filmmakers are doing. And this is something that's really maddening about a lot of Shakespeare film adaptations. They feel like they can just sort of coast on the text, which is fine because the text is brilliant. It's Shakespeare. It's some of the greatest poetry in English. But when you're going to make a film, you need to get to the meat of it. You need to adapt and interpret the text in some sort of meaningful way. What are you saying with A Midsummer Night's Dream in modern LA? Well, that love is kind of a stage. That everything is kind of a performance.
Well, you could also talk about, I mean, if you were to ask me, like, we want to do it in Los Angeles, a lot of the love stories in particular are about not just love, but obsession, and in a world of celebrity that makes a lot of sense.
They don't really play up that angle enough.
They don't. It's so weird. They introduce context, and then they do nothing with it.
The Duke is played like this big Hollywood hotshot, and he passes around his cards. It's like, yeah, you should perform in my court, and it's essentially just show your film at my house. I'm a big producer, and I can get you a gig. And all of the filmmakers are really excited about that. Fran Kranz plays Bottom the Weaver, and the other. I hate to call this clever because it isn't, but I think it kind of is. One of the magic spells the fairies sort of play as a trick is they want Titania, the fairy queen, to humiliate her, want her to fall in love with Bottom the Weaver, who has been transformed into an ass.
Now, in the play, a donkey.
He has a donkey's head, and surely you've seen a version of it where his head is a donkey head. In this one, they turn his head into an ass, like he has a butt for a face.
And it farts.
And it farts a lot.
And honestly, it feels like they ripped off that one joke from that episode of South Park where Cartman turned his hand into Jennifer Lopez, and they're like people with butts for faces show up looking for Ben Affleck.
I don't remember why.
Oh, maybe
but
it was,
yeah.
I might be confusing
The Butts
two
for
different
Faces,
episodes.
I think, was a different episode.
It was still
yeah.
Ben Affleck, though. It was a Ben Affleck episode.
But yeah, he has like a butt for a face, and they say you now you have the head of an ass. And okay, you know what? If you're gonna try to wring laughs out of Shakespeare, which is hard to do, like Shakespeare does have this very classical clowny approach, and it takes a really talented comedian to present that in a natural, slapsticky sort of way. I think
to a modern audience,
to a modern
the flowery
audience.
prose can be a real impediment to really thigh-slapping wit, even though there's a lot of really good gags in his material.
Kenneth Branagh's Much Ado About Nothing was brilliant at this. Yeah. It found every last bit of humor in Shakespeare's text and made it funny to a contemporary audience. Joss Whedon's Much Ado About Nothing whizzed it down its leg, because there's nothing funny about that.
And the presence of Fran Kranz obviously creates a big parallel.
Because he was...
he was who was he in that? No, he was the
he was the young lover.
He was the young lover who Much Ado About Nothing. Joss Whedon's Much Ado About Nothing is cute. I would go as far as cute. There's some cute.
It's a fun hobby.
There are some performances I like in it, but it feels like something
the Beatrice
people made
was good. The Benedict wasn't.
I think the Benedict was fine. The Beatrice was really good. Amy Acker was a really good Beatrice. It's a movie that feels like we kind of just shot it in our backyard and we released it because why not? A Midsummer Night's Dream feels like that as well, but it feels like that's not like we're like just doing something for a hobby. It feels like this is the best we could do. It really does.
This is a really, really ambitious 19-year-old has just written a screenplay, and he thinks it's really, really clever. And here's something that's really funny. The green world, like the forest that they run into, is Topanga Canyon.
It totally is.
And no, they say it. It's Topanga Canyon.
Yeah.
They actually go. We get to trace them up the roads.
Yeah.
In Topanga Canyon, there's actually a theater called the Theatricum Botanicum. It's an outdoor theater in Topanga Canyon. It's this beautiful glade with this wonderful outdoor stage where they regularly put on A Midsummer Night's Dream because that's the ideal place to see it.
Right.
So I had this sneaking suspicion that they were actually going to do something clever. They were going to go up into Topanga Canyon, involved in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and they were going to go to a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, and reality was going to start bleeding into each other, and they were going to start really effing with the script. But they didn't do that. They just played it straight all the way through.
It never gets clever. Like, but it just, my thing is this. If you're going to do this, like, we don't have a big budget, but we want to do Shakespeare. Why do the one with all the magical shit? Like, why do the really complicated one? There's so many Shakespeare stories which are relatively straightforward. You do not need a huge budget to tell Othello. You do not need a huge budget to tell The Twelfth Night. You do need a budget to do Midsummer Night's Dream even remotely well. And their solution of just shine a red light on the forest just calls attention to just kind of just how the low ambition of it.
And it looks like they shot in a park for a lot of it.
But listen, that's just, I don't want to make fun of them because they had a low budget. That's neither here nor there. It's distracting for an audience. I don't want to make fun of him for that. My problem is, and it's kind of the same problem I ironically had with the first Purge, where the thing with the first Purge, if you'll recall from an episode or two ago, was the point of the story is the first Purge, the first night where all crime was legal, was the least eventful one. And as a result, you have the least eventful Purge movie. It's baked into the premise. The idea of A Midsummer Night's Dream, because we're seeing so much of it through the lens of student film, like literally student film. These are student filmmakers. And that approach, that cinematic style, is kind of the raison d'etre of the movie. The problem is it ends up feeling like a student film, and it ends up feeling... I think the best you could go for was charmingly naive. And instead, I think it's just naive.
And its naivete is especially stressed in the fact that they keep on quoting other Shakespeare plays. Yeah. They there's a bit where somebody's drinking from a mug and it says brevity is the soul of wit. That's from Hamlet.
Yeah.
And somebody says, there's a rather cute TV ad for AFI, the Athenian Film Institute. Isn't that cute? And they quote, come strut and fret your fateful hour upon the stage. That's from Macbeth.
Yeah.
I
actually liked the side gags. The side gags are kind of funny. There's like a bit where we find out that Hermia is a big movie star. We see this montage of movie posters she's in, including one that's like, the rest is silence, and it's the Silence of the Lambs poster. That's kind of funny.
All right.
The one gag that I'm embarrassed to admit I love. Embarrassed, but it made me laugh really hard. It's when Bottom is going to his audition for Pyramus and Thisbe.
You would laugh at this. This is so terrible.
He walks into a room, and he just says, 2B? And the guy just looks and says, not 2B. 2B is down the hall.
So stupid. Look,
that was kind of funny. That was something that other movies kind of weren't doing. Just using like this whole world of Shakespearean bits. That was kind of funny. I kind of wish the movie had been more about that and trying less to be just a straight up Midsummer Night's Dream in this new context, because they didn't have the material, they didn't have the budget. Some of the cast feels up for it. I think Lily Rabe is really good as Helena. I think Hamish Linklater's a really good Lysander.
Hamish Linklater is pretty good in just about everything.
He's a really good actor.
And I
I
like
keep waiting for him to get a big breakout.
I like Fran Kranz. I'd love to see him on stage in a proper Shakespearean role, because he's one of the few modern actors who really kind of puts his mouth around the language. It's especially clear when you watch Joss Whedon's Much Ado About Nothing, where like half of the actors just don't know how to say Shakespeare.
Yeah, Nathan Fillion is a really funny actor. He's a bit lost with the material.
Yeah, he just doesn't know what to do with Dogberry.
Yeah, he's doing everything he can to be charming and just say the words.
Yeah.
I will be charming and say words.
Get to the end of the scene. Even Clark Gregg, who's a very good actor, like he's just like,
it's not really a Shakespearean actor.
Kind of there, but yeah. Fran Kranz is like one who really knows how to handle that kind of language. And I think he'd be a great Bottom if he was allowed to do just a straight production, like a period production of Midsummer Night's Dream.
I actually really liked Charity Wakefield as Quince the director.
Yeah.
I thought she was actually... she's an actor I've had my eye on for a bit, and she keeps showing up in like really good roles and things that don't go anywhere, like that Wesley Snipes action show, The Player. Like, she's good. I'm like, I'm going to keep an eye on her. She's got a real presence. And here... I like what they did with the character. She's
sort of this hard-working director who's determined to get her show up.
Yeah, which is kind of like
a different play on that character.
It's a slightly different play on Quince, and I appreciate that. I also I do like this one thing they did with Demetrius, where they clarified that Demetrius used to be in love with Helena, and then he stumbled across the love potion. Which kind of takes the curse off of the ending.
Wasn't quite sure what was going on, but yeah.
I think the idea, because my whole thing is...
It's kind of reigniting the passion rather than sort of brainwashing him and forcing him into
that's
each
the thing.
other's
Like, the
arms.
original ending of Midsummer Night's Dream is everyone is fine except Demetrius, who is brainwashed into loving Helena, which is always struck me as kind of not a happy ending. Like, there's at least some tragedy in it.
He's been such a dick. It's nice to see him sort of forced into that.
It feels like comeuppance, but it also is a little gross. And here they found a little workaround. They're able to make it pretty simple visually. He was in love with Helena, and then he accidentally stumbled onto like the shrubbery where the love potion was, and he mistakenly fell in love with Hermia.
So that's why he was in love with her.
So
right?
actually, everyone does end up really
all
happy.
Straightened out.
That's actually not unclever, and I actually do like that. So it's not a complete. It's not a complete wash. But man, see the 30s version.
Yeah, the one with Mickey Rooney and Laurence Olivier.
I'm not even a fan of the 90s version with Stanley Tucci and Michelle Pfeiffer. It's not very funny.
It's not funny, and it's just paced badly.
I kind of like the
design
look of it.
The design is okay, but yeah. I constantly long for like the next big A production of a Shakespeare feature film. They come along. They seem to come along so rarely anymore. That Macbeth was awful. The one with Michael Fassbender.
Oh, it's terrible.
It was a terrible
Macbeth.
Shot.
It was so beautifully shot. I think some people were kind of missing
great
how like
dreary
they
for our photography, but what was
airballed the material so bad.
The last great Macbeth film was in the 1970s. These things don't come along so often anymore, and I'm always on the lookout for a good Shakespeare adaptation. And when you're in college and you have that ambitious bug and you're not really sure what to do with the bard, but you want to do it, I can still admire that ambition.
Yeah.
Because somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to be out there doing some wacky, Echo Park, Beverly Hills, Topanga Canyon set version of A Midsummer Night's Dream that's kind of cheap and really ambitious and doesn't quite work. So I admire this thing as an object.
Absolutely. And I think there are moments of inspiration.
And I want these things to come along every once in a while because I want Shakespeare to stay relevant. Shakespeare needs to stay because Shakespeare defined humanity in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I'm a big Shakespeare nerd.
Me too. You're even more so than I am. Yeah.
So, keeping that poetry as part of the lexicon, even if you're going to do something that doesn't understand it or doesn't quite do it, is still important. So, on our grading scale of C- to C+, I'm still going to give this a C, even though it doesn't work very well.
That's very kind of you. I'm going to give it a high C-. I think if this was a student project, I'd give it an A, but it's not. It's in theaters and everything, and because it clearly, the ambition was there. He had some good ideas. Some of the performances are good, but ultimately, it doesn't come together. You're also dealing with Midsummer Night's Dream is just a difficult play to adapt in general, because the story ends and then it goes on for like another half hour so we can see that play within a play.
Yeah.
And from a movie perspective, that's really hard to make work as pacing goes.
Because we're used to 3-act structures in movies, and Shakespeare wrote 5-act plays, so they move differently.
But even then, the plot usually didn't end until the end of Act 5.
Well, it depends on the play.
True, but usually there might have been some wrapping up, but like usually it doesn't stop and then we watch another play.
Right.
It's a little weird. Whatever. Yeah, I give it a C-.
Have you seen A Winter's Tale? You know, where it's like one play ends and then there's another play.
Fair enough. I give it a C-, but it's not without its charms. Okay. So fair enough. Siberia?
Siberia C-. It's just mediocre and dull.
Yeah. Don't worry, he won't get far on foot. It's a C.
Okay.
Like middle of the, like if it should have been a C+, because there were talented people involved. It's an interesting subject, but they managed to find a not particularly interesting angle, and that's the real tragedy of it. So it's not bad if you're a fan of the actors. It might be worth seeing, but yeah, only a C. What do we got here? 8th grade.
8th grade at C+. Please see it. It's one of the best movies of 2018.
Okay. Hotel Transylvania 3. I'm torn. It's either a high C or a really low C+. I'm gonna give it a high C. Like a really high C. If you got kids, it'll be fun. If you really like animation, the Tartakovsky films are kind of a nice antidote to the way almost everyone else does CGI. So it's pretty funny. It's not gonna blow you away. It won't be your favorite movie.
Hotel Transylvania films, the Peanuts movie, and Captain Underpants are the only ones that and I guess Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs too.
Both with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
I guess both of them. Yeah. They're the ones who are really kind of stretching what CGI can do in terms of making it look classical and kind of rubberizing the characters again.
I didn't see the Peanuts one. Fair enough. And Skyscraper.
Never more than a C. It will never, ever be more than a C.
See, here's the deal.
We're going to wait 20 years. People are going to write those think pieces. Remember Skyscraper and how great it was? No, it's just fine. It will only ever be just fine.
We approach the 4-star, 3-star movie very differently. So you think a 4-star, 3-star movie is a 3-star movie. Yeah. I think it's a 4-star movie. So Skyscraper, I'm not going to actually call it a 4-star movie, but it's a C+. I definitely recommend you go see it. It's a fun movie. I don't think you'll have any regrets. I think you'll whatever money you spend on it, you go see it in a theater, you rent it, you buy it, whatever. You'll say to yourself, "Glad I did that. That was fun."
It's the best kind of filler, but I think it's just filler.
That's fine too, and I don't think it's trying to be much more than that. Okay, so fair enough. All right, let's move on to our big double feature. This week, for no particular reason, we decided that all of your options were going to be bad thrillers that don't get talked about a lot anymore.
That were once really lambasted and are just sort of not part of the conversation.
Yeah, so like films like The Juror, starring Demi Moore as the juror, and Alec Baldwin as a guy trying to stop the juror from juring.
He's trying to get under her skin and get her to change her mind in a big important jury case, and he's supposed to kill her, but then he falls in love with her and warns her, but then he has to kill her anyway. And
this was like the
closest video games with her kid, and
this was the closest poll we've ever had. Like people were really torn.
All three were pretty close.
Yeah. So that was really. What was the third one again? What was the other one that didn't get picked?
Not Swim Fan. It was.
Glass House.
The Glass House with Lily Sobieski.
Yeah, which is about Lily Sobieski moving into a glass house.
Which I had confused for Cold Creek Manor for a second, the Mike Figgis film, which is even worse.
It's worse, but it's not good worse. It's actually just boring. Yeah. It's not a good movie. And you ended up picking Color of Night, a erotic thriller.
A Razzie-winning erotic thriller.
Yeah, Razzie Award for Worst Picture of the Year. It came out in 1994. It was directed by Richard Rush, a filmmaker who you should know. You probably don't. Most people don't, but he's actually had an interesting career. He directed what may be the best movie ever made about making movies, if you ask me.
Really?
Stuntman.
Not Day for Night, or
there are arguments to be made, but I think the Stuntman, in its well-honed honest cynicism, not cynical as an excuse not to be mature, but no, we're taking a good hard look at Hollywood and we don't like what we find. I think The Stuntman is a really very rapturously made motion picture. It's very dark, but it's very excellent. I'm a huge fan.
I haven't seen The Stuntman.
We should.
It's a big hole in my education.
I'm telling you, man, if we do a movie about making movies, that's like, for one thing, I'm going to recommend we do The Stuntman, because you're going to dig it. You're going to dig it. He also helped pioneer.
He also did Freebie and the Bean, which is a really good film.
Yeah, the Freebie and the Bean, which is a movie people don't talk anymore, but it's one of the first buddy cop movies. there were movies about cops before, but in terms of like the format that we now know, like a lot of people think like Lethal Weapon and 48 Hours invented that.
Well,
Probably
it
goes
kind
back.
of reinvented it, but yeah.
Yeah, it reinvented it, but Freebie and the Bean is kind of like the prototype. For what we came to think of as the buddy cop movie. So he's led an interesting career, and the last feature film he directed is really quite bad.
Well, okay, so it's 1994, and the market for the erotic thriller had reopened thanks to the success, I think largely just very much specifically because of Paul Verhoeven's Basic Instinct.
Yeah, there were other erotic thrillers that were kind of a big deal before that, particularly Fatal Attraction, which is a great movie. It was nominated for Best Picture, and deservedly so. But Basic Instinct kind of blew the roof off of this genre and turned it into not just you can make some money off of it, but you could make a blockbuster.
Yeah, like Basic Instinct was a huge deal, and
Everyone
there were
was
a
talking
lot
about
of think pieces about it at the time because there was so much sex. Like there was not that level of sex in a mainstream Hollywood film kind of ever. Like there's like a lot of full frontal nudity and just frank discussions of sexuality, and the main character, what was it, Catherine Trammell?
Yeah.
She's bisexual and she just openly starts making out with other women, and that's just part of who she is. And also she might be a murderer, so that doesn't really do a lot for bisexuals.
It's one of the most like forthrightly lurid mainstream Hollywood movies ever. And here's the deal. I have a lot of problems with it. It's not badly made.
Well,
actually.
Paul Verhoeven knows what he's doing, and it takes people a decade to figure that out.
Yeah.
Just like RoboCop and Starship Troopers, it took people a while to pick up on the fact that these things are kind of satirical.
Yeah, they're not just fun; they're actually good.
And I think Paul Verhoeven was also trying to just ratchet up all of the most disgusting elements to kind of turn it into a vague satire.
I think so.
I think it's kind of a satire.
I think he's making fun of a lot of the elements of even just mystery fiction as well. We're not here to talk about Basic Instinct. We're here to talk about one of the films that came in the wake of it. And as we've discussed before several times, when a movie is successful, you get a lot of knockoffs, and the knockoffs tend to copy the easiest, most superficial elements.
The surface elements.
So, in the wake of Basic Instinct, we got films like Sliver and Jade.
And Indecent Proposal.
Which really wasn't like a thriller,
well, maybe
but,
not, but
it still could only have been made after Basic Instinct.
R-rated films made for an adult audience, which is something we don't have a lot of now. So we really have to stress kind of how novel that felt at the time and how really novel it is now. But yeah, into this big pool of sex came Color of Night, which purported itself, even before it was released, as the sexiest one yet. And it has full frontal male nudity and a lot of full frontal female nudity and more bisexual female characters and just sex scenes that go on and on and on, and 50 minutes later they stop and have an intermission, and then they continue after the intermission.
Which is pretty ironic considering the movie really isn't about sex.
It's not.
Basic Instinct was about sex in a very direct way.
This also was in the mid-90s, but we were still kind of working yuppies out of our system. And there were... I'm totally serious about it. Wall Street really kind of blew the lid off of it. But yeah, by the mid-90s, it's like we're still using yuppies as archetypes to show how this pursuit of laissez-faire wealth, even into the Bill Clinton administration, was still producing this class of soul-sucking wealthy professionals. And Bruce Willis is one of those. He's a psychologist who has just treated his girlfriend, Anna Karenina, so badly that she throws herself out of a window.
It's not a girl. He's not his girlfriend. It's a patient.
It's a patient.
He's a patient. Yeah. So, at the beginning of the movie, we meet Bruce Willis and his patient, played by the great Kathleen Wilhot, an actor who I really like and never really got like a lot of starring roles. I particularly enjoyed her in the first Witchboard.
She's really fantastic in
Roadhouse.
Yeah,
she's great. You've seen her, so you'll recognize her.
There's the scene where Patrick Swayze gets out of bed and kind of like flexes his body and shows off his ass, and we cut back to Catherine Wilhot, and she's just like speechless at how amazing this ass is. And it's really rare when you get a film that is just so wholly devoted to the female gaze as something like Roadhouse.
Yeah, I like Roadhouse a lot.
I heard Amy Nicholson recently talk about Thor in those terms.
Yeah.
Thor is a film about the female gaze because Chris Hemsworth looks like Chris Hemsworth.
Roadhouse gets lumped in with all of those like really macho action movies of the 1980s, but yeah, compared, it really doesn't play like any of them. It totally has a totally different vibe from beginning to end, even though there are superficial similarities.
It's also great.
I like Roadhouse a lot.
I mean, it's awful, but it's great.
It's great. So at the beginning of the movie, there's this weird intro with Kathleen Wilhoit where she like puts on like so much lipstick. She has like a lipstick
like she's like
canteen.
It's like Marietta Fortune and Wild at Heart. She's just like going mad and rubbing lipstick on her face.
She has like a lipstick delivery system that like looks like it's based off of like that weird device from Masters of the Universe that builds like boom tubes and takes across the universe, and it just shoots out like lipstick.
What was it, the Cosmic Key?
Yeah, she looks like the Cosmic Key, but it gives you lipstick, and she puts on all this lipstick, and she puts a gun in her mouth, and then she starts filleting the gun. And this is not important later. Like that like particular thing she does isn't addressed at all. It's super strange. So then it cuts to her, and she's with her psychologist, played by Bruce Willis, and he's
He's a complete dick to her.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been in therapy. I know a lot of people's experiences are very different in therapy. The sort of confrontational, I'm tired of your crap attitude that Bruce Willis has is not good therapy. And he pushes her so far that she's like, you know what? Fuck it. Life is too hard. And she throws herself out a window. And I guess he was on the 2000th floor of a building.
It takes her like 10 minutes to fall.
Like, it looks like a hell of a thing. It actually gave me a bit of vertigo. Just like all the like the end of the game.
It's really stylish because when she hits the floor, there's this shot from, as if it's shot from underneath the street, and she's laying on a pane of glass, and we see the blood start to pool out. It's, it's
crazy. And so he watches her, and then like we see like his POV of her body on the floor, which is ridiculous because she would look like an ant from how far up she was. But we see the POV, and then like we see like the blood is turning gray, and that's when we find out that Bruce Willis, because of his guilt, is psychosomatically colorblind, and this is not important.
That's
later.
Also not important later.
It's such a big deal. It's the title of the movie. And it isn't. I thought maybe we were going to find out there was like some clue that he missed.
Because he was colorblind.
Because this person was actually a redhead, and he thought they were a brunette or something. And then it's like, no, she was the killer the whole time. Oh my god, I didn't recognize that car because it was red. Not important.
And then during the climax, he's getting strangled, and the red comes flooding back in that moment.
Dario Argento could have done so much with that plot point. Like just that. It's such a dynamic visual premise.
That's all he would have done with the movie.
I don't understand how Richard Rush made a movie about a guy who is psychosomatically colorblind because of guilt over death, and it's also got like a serial killer in it, and he can't see the color red. They should have drained all the red out of that movie. There should have been no red until the finale. Or that's what it should have been. No red at all.
Or the femme fatale is the only one we ever see in red, which is what they try to do, but they don't commit.
They give up on it quickly.
After that, we start the movie. And it turns out Bruce Willis is friends with Scott Bakula, and dig this cast. This movie has a great cast.
It's
by the
really
way.
good.
So Scott Bakula has been running a group therapy session on people who have various problems and shouldn't be in a group together.
They don't nothing in common.
They don't all have the same psychological problem. They're just all in therapy for different reasons. Scott Bakula has decided to put him in a group. Fine.
Okay, so we've got Leslie Ann Warren as a...
kind of the nymphomaniac.
Yeah, nymphomaniac housewife. She marries a lot of rich people, and then they just happen to die. Who knew? Brad Dourif plays this incredibly, really intense obsessive... Really intense obsessive compulsive. We got Kevin J. O'Connor as a...
I love Kevin J. O'Connor.
He's a fun actor. You know him from like every Stephen Sommers movie ever. He plays a guy who... I'm actually a little hazy on what his exact pathology is, but he's basically a jerk, and he's super kinky.
I think they're trying to treat his kink as if that's his pathology. Like, he's an artist, and his rich dad forced him to go into therapy, and I think because his dad discovered he was kinky. Yeah. So he actually doesn't have a pathology. He just is being forced into therapy.
We have Lance Henriksen as a grieving widower. These people
That's his only problem.
Yeah. And you have, and sometimes we try to like avoid spoilers because we want to like give you an opportunity to discover the films for yourselves. The spoilers in Color of Night are so obvious. It would be like And I'm going to assume you know the ending of Citizen Kane because it's 70-something years old, and it's even just through cultural osmosis, you probably know what Rosebud is. So, Rosebud, it's a sled. There we go. We all know it.
Rosebud plays the last patient.
Yeah, like imagine if at the beginning of Citizen Kane it was like Rosebud. Oh, we have to find out what Rosebud is, and some guy walks in the foreground carrying a sled with Rosebud on it, and it was just like, "Hey guys, what's going on?" "Oh, nothing." "Okay, I'll be back in 5 minutes." Just every 5 minutes they do the same thing. It's so obvious.
So the word was his lost innocence, and Wells did nothing to patch up the true meaning in his. I got it.
Get it? The last character is a character named Richie.
Richie, who is a trans woman.
Played by actress Jane March. Jane March also plays the woman Bruce Willis falls in love with, and the woman Leslie Ann Warren falls in love with, and everyone else's girlfriend.
Yeah.
It is...
And Kevin J. O'Connor's, like, dominatrix.
Yeah. And the movie...
I forgot her connection to Lance Henriksen.
The movie makes almost no attempt to hide this. Like, she's wearing wigs. That's it.
I actually was convinced by the makeup. I could tell that the Richie character was played by a woman, but I didn't know it was Jane March.
Okay.
That actually fooled me.
Okay.
So
fair enough. Fair enough. It got you. But for me, it was really obvious from frame one.
So yeah, Bruce Willis gets into a fender bender with Jane March. Jane March looks like sex on legs, and she's all got her hair and makeup and flirts really heavily and says, "Hey, can I come by your house and we can have a lot of sex?" And he says, "Okay, sure." And that's indeed what happens.
They have many a sex.
They have many sexes. And the first sex scene takes place in a pool. You do see Bruce Willis's wiener.
It is not his though.
Oh, it's not his wiener?
Nope, that is someone else's wiener.
I feel gypped.
I'm sorry.
I feel cheated.
Yeah. We also skipped over kind of an important part, which is Scott Bakula gets murdered by someone with a knife taped to a chainmail glove. Which, again, this feels like such a Dario Argento movie. We probably should have done a Dario Argento movie for a double feature, whatever.
Maybe. I'm glad we did the one we did.
I'm glad we did, too, because it's a brilliant motion picture. But, so Scott Bakula gets killed, and Bruce Willis takes over his group therapy group, and also his house. Which I guess doesn't go to the next of kin. It just goes to Bruce Willis because he happened to be staying over.
It's stuck in probate. He gets to crash there.
Yes, I'm not sure why that works. And so he is trying to find out who killed Scott Bakula. He knows it's someone in the group because that's who Scott Bakula said. Someone in the group is sending me death threats. I don't know who.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, cops Ruben Blades and Eric LaSalle are trying to solve the mystery, and they're trying to get Bruce Willis to do their investigating for him within the group because everyone in the group has emotional or psychological problems. And Bruce Willis, theoretically, can sort of figure out what's going on with them without being confrontational because Ruben Blades plays the whole movie like he's on coke.
Which he might have been. Who knows?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Ruben Blades is actually a really good actor. I've seen him good in a lot of movies and TV shows.
He's really good in Cradle of Rock.
Yeah, he's great. I actually really like Ruben Blades a lot. His performance is so unchecked. All of those movies where Al Pacino is just playing it to the rafters.
Yeah, everything after Dick Tracy.
Dick Tracy, Son of a Woman, that one scene in Heat where he's talking about big butts.
She's got a great ass!
Yeah, okay.
I'm not gonna act, I'm just gonna yell!
Okay, imagine the worst take he could have done in any of those. The one where it's just I don't even know what planet that inflection was from, Al. We have to do another one. That's every Ruben Blades scene. And again, I really like Ruben Blades as an actor. I don't understand his performance at all. It feels like he's in a completely different movie/universe.
The actress I feel the most sorry for is Jane March.
Yeah.
Because she was asked to do something that's really kind of impossible. She has to play, and the big twist is that Jane March plays all of these characters because she is a woman with multiple personality disorder who just so happens to fall in love with all of the people in this group, or maybe it was her involvement that somehow got them in the same room together. I wasn't really clear on that.
No, she didn't get them in the same room together. What happened was she had a brother who was abused, and then when he committed suicide, the family member who was abusing the brother started abusing her, but started calling her by his name. So she started losing her own identity. This is the plot of the movie. I'm not saying it's good psychology. She started losing her own identity, and when she's with other people, it seems that she becomes the exact person they want romantically.
Okay.
That's the idea. So all these people that...
It's like that sex alien from that episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. She's like the ideal mate who like projects herself onto Picard when she's accidentally unfrozen.
Sure.
Remember that? It was called The Perfect Mate?
Sure.
It's a good episode.
Sure. So that's the idea. Everyone who has these very particular needs, like Brad Dourif is very obsessive compulsive, and he says that this new woman I've met is even tidier than I am. Kevin J. O'Connor, his girlfriend is the ultimate dominatrix. And Bruce Willis wanted someone who was kind of nice and likes having sex with pools. Like, Bruce Willis is such a poorly defined character.
His ideal type was a very attractive woman who likes to have sex a lot. So, very specific to him in particular.
Here's the thing.
and wears a lot of red, which he can't see.
I'm a fan of the erotic thriller genre because I actually think the construction of the genre is actually kind of inherently interesting. It's one of the few genres we have that deals with sex. And it doesn't just deal with sex, it deals with a lot of the cultural attitudes towards sex.
It tries to have a conversation about sex while depicting it. The way people have sex in erotic thrillers is important. So it's actually kind of part of the plot that we get to watch them making love.
Absolutely. So, like, in something like Fatal Attraction, for example, the idea is Michael Douglas cheats on his wife with Glenn Close. It's a sin, literally. It's in the Ten Commandments. And then he tries to pass it off like it weren't no thing because, screw it, it's the 80s, right? I'm rich. You're cool, right? We're cool.
I was Gordon Gekko just recently.
And it turns out that, no, it's not cool. And I think a lot of people sort of misinterpret Fatal Attraction as though, like, oh, how horrifying, this woman he slept with was a maniac. And actually,
if you look at it from his perspective.
If you look at it from his perspective.
If you look at it from Glenn Close's perspective.
And obviously she has problems, but the erotic thriller genre and like the way that it treats women can sometimes be demonic and horrible, and it can also sometimes be subtly kind of subversive and heroic. So like, I think every femme fatale, like every true femme fatale, is in some respects using the system against the men who exploit it. So you get to be in charge and you get to have sex with anyone and it doesn't really matter and you can just throw us away like everything. Well, I'm just literally just going to do that to you and I'm going to be portrayed as the villain. Yeah. That's how it works. So, Color of Night doesn't have an attitude about sex. It just has sex.
It just wants to be really lurid, and
it's not about something. It's not about the shame of it. It's not about getting paid back for your sins.
And the way
some of them have sex sometimes.
The camera luxuriates over everybody's bodies, and Jane March said in interviews afterwards that she really regretted doing this movie. Not only did it kind of wreck her career, she didn't do big mainstream films after this. She worked, she got roles in smaller films, but it did sort of sink her as sort of like a viable A-list actress. And she was previously in another erotic thriller called The Lover.
Which I've never seen. But I know it stars Tony Leung, who's like one of the greatest actors of his generation.
And I read an interview with her where she said that doing The Lover was actually pretty tasteful because it's actually about sex. It's about an adult view of sexuality and the way these people are relating. It's about their relationship, and the sex is part of that. It's a good story. Color of Night is essentially porn. It's just using her body for titillation's sake. And, some actresses or even actors are okay with that. They don't mind being gratuitous about it. Ask David Duchovny about that at some point. Like, you want to shoot my ass? Fine. Look at it. Aren't you worried about this being important to the story? Don't care. It's my ass. Point a camera at it. Sure. She was really, really regretful about this movie, about doing this film. Even though on paper it might seem kind of interesting, you get to play this very Hitchcockian, De Palma-ish, multiple personality character.
If De Palma directed this, it might have been good.
It might have been good.
Early 90s De Palma? That might have been good.
It was before he started to suck in earnest, but yeah.
Basically after Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible, after Mission Impossible.
You think that was the turning point for
I think
for
so.
De Palma?
I know some people love Femme Fatale. I don't.
I love Femme Fatale.
I don't.
And Passions is fun.
There's stuff I really like in that one, but like I think he hasn't made a great... I can just totally get behind this movie since Mission Impossible.
Femme Fatale's the one for me. I think Femme Fatale's pretty excellent.
I might need to revisit it, maybe, because I heard a lot of people really, really love it. Maybe I'll like it more now. I haven't seen it in a long time. But yeah, Color of Night, it's this weird movie where it has like all of these individual elements that sound fun. and none of them are fun. And we saw the director's cut, which is like 20 minutes longer than the theatrical.
140 minutes.
It is slow.
Nothing happens.
Like, the opening is pretty good because, like, you're still feeling around the world, and every scene feels like it's a different movie is starting. And, like, again, the cast is good.
I love watching all of those actors.
I would watch a movie that was just everyone in that a group therapy session, just because everyone in that scene is a good actor, or at least can be.
I'd love to see all of the actors getting around a table in a group therapy type situation, just discussing the making of Color of Night and sort of the effect on their lives. Yeah, I did Color. Yeah, I really regret that one. Yeah. Bruce Willis, what'd you think about it? Well, I thought it would be really kind of a daring thing, but yeah, just no, it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, it's
got nothing to it.
It has nothing to it. It's not about anything. It doesn't contribute anything. It doesn't even work with the things that it has, the strengths that it has. It doesn't do enough with them. It doesn't do enough
anything
with the cast.
With it. It's about psychology, but it's not about psychology.
It's not about anything. And I would watch, and what I think, I don't know the chronology on this, because Skinemax is kind of like this like genre that's no one's done a lot of scholarly work on, but the decently budgeted, made for TV, straight to video erotic thrillers of the 90s in particular. Often starring Shannon Tweed or Joan Severance. This was a huge genre. It was an accepted genre. People understood it as a genre. It wasn't a very well respected genre. Every once in a while, something would come out of that school and would be better than anyone thought it was. Like The Last Seduction came really close to being Skinemax, but it ended up being like a great movie and it got a theatrical release. Like these sort of tawdry, low-budget sex thrillers on television. I feel like a lot of them owe more to Color of Night than they do to Basic Instinct, because I couldn't tell you how many Shannon Tweed movies I've seen where she played a sex therapist in a
specialized in rough sex,
specialized in group therapy, and someone is killing off her patients. I think I've seen that literally 5 times with Shannon Tweed.
There's at least 6 or 7 of those.
Yeah, it is such a thing, and I keep waiting for someone to try to, like, you know how, like, there'll be, like, a genre no one gives a crap about, but then Tarantino does a movie and people are like, ooh, we should make Grindhouse movies. Yeah. I want to see that with Skinemax. I want to see someone bring it back and do it in, like, a classy, fun, modern way. I think it'd be really fun.
I think it'll happen. I think the erotic thriller might have a chance to come back. There's a difference between the kind of movie that Color of Night is, and I alluded to this at the beginning of the episode, where there's a lot of sex in it, but the sex is not adult. It's not about adults having sex, talking about sex, or relating to sexual matters in an adult fashion.
Right.
The sex is included because Joe Asterhaus thought it was hot.
Yeah.
Joe Asterhaus, who wrote Basic Instinct and Showgirls and a lot of other masturbatory fantasy movies. I love Showgirls, don't get me wrong, but that is an offensive film.
Tawdry is the word.
Tawdry. But then there are other movies that do talk about sex in the way adults would talk about sex and have sex in the way adults talk about sex.
Before we make this final segue, I do want to talk about, because we put it out once again on Schmoeville for people to predict what movie we were going to pick. And you've probably seen the title of the episode, so you know what it is. But whatever. I want to talk, because once again, there were a lot of really good recommendations, many of which we considered, some of which we didn't. And I want to talk about a few of them. Let's see what we got here. So we asked, we're going to review Color of Night. What movie do you think would make the perfect double feature? A good movie. The first suggestion was from Joseph Weeks, and it is my favorite Brian De Palma movie, Body Double. I love Body Double. Okay, it is insane.
De Palma is all over Color of Night as well. So we were seriously considering some De Palma. And
Julia Artemis Pinkham suggested Vertigo, which is pretty close, actually, in terms of, like, here's a protagonist who has, like, a psychological affliction and how it affects
multiple versions of the same character.
And it affects the story, at least theoretically it should affect the story, but actually the story isn't about that. Like, structurally, there are similarities.
Yeah.
So that's a good idea.
That would have been a good one, actually.
Michael Campbell suggested Gone Girl, which we actually talked about, and I think is actually pretty relevant, but didn't go there. Let's see what we got here. Robert Miller suggested Blue Velvet, which, Blue Velvet is great. One of the best movies of the 1980s period. Fatal Attraction has come up as well. Basic Instinct, of course, came up. The Last Seduction.
Here's the thing about Basic Instinct. It was really influential. It was a huge hit. It's not a great film.
No, it's a very watchable film. It gets your attention, but it's
effective, but it's not great.
Yeah. Let's see what we got here. The Crying Game is actually a really good pick for obvious reasons, perhaps. It's been a while since I revisited that one. I'd be very curious to now. Let's see what we got
Especially,
here.
In the age of transvisibility, how does that film play anymore?
I'm very curious from that perspective in particular. We had another one we considered was Eyes Wide Shut, which really was more about the shame and the jealousy. It's more about sex than Color of Night is. And it's also...
I would love to take any opportunity to watch Eyes Wide Shut, because I kind of love that movie, but... it's underrated. I think it's worth more than it's given credit for. But it doesn't quite fit with.
A good suggestion from Matt Adams. One of my favorite movies of the last couple of years. It's kind of fell out of the conversation a bit. The Handmaiden.
Okay, yeah.
Which is a great movie.
Film,
Which is a great movie, which ends up being very much about how men view women and how women fight back against that and have to play into it sometimes, but also fight back. And I don't want to ruin a second of that movie for you.
It's about the destruction of the male gaze, and it's actually really terrific.
That's a brilliant motion picture. Fatal Attraction came up again. Double Indemnity came up. Nighthawks came up, which I'm not sure I see how that one works, but I do like Nighthawks.
Well, Double Indemnity is an interesting guess because our B feature is very similar to Double Indemnity, actually.
Yeah. Very heavily inspired by Double Indemnity. Our B feature today is Lawrence Kasdan's Body Double.
No, Body Heat.
Body Heat.
You got it wrong.
After all that build-up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the best movie ever made, Orson Welles' Ernest Goes to Camp.
Ernest Goes to Cain.
No, we're talking about Body Heat.
Oh, God, I'd love to see Ernest Goes to Cain. It's Citizen Kane, but it's Ernest P. Worrell. That'd be great.
Oh, my God, yeah, and the reporter is Vern.
There you go, perfect.
Oh my God, it works so well. It's on so many levels.
Find out why you said, know what I mean, when he died.
Why did he say, know what I mean? Who was Vern?
His name was Vern. We knew who he was.
Yeah, we're talking about Body Heat.
We're talking about Lawrence Kasdan's Body Heat. Body Heat came out in 1981, early 1980s, and it's very, very... I would compare it to something like Chinatown in that it's a film noir that was made very effectively, can be included in the main of the genre, even though it was clearly homage.
Yes.
It was a throwback.
Well, it's an homage to it, but only in terms of the way that it evokes similar feelings and similar styles. It's
not
never actually
stylistically,
Yeah, a little bit, but it's mostly just playing off of the same world and the same vibe, and it's doing it in a way that you could do in the 1980s that you couldn't.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you watch a movie like Double Indemnity or The Postman Always Rings Twice, the original version of it, they were made during the production code, and they are about sex. They are about people having affairs and killing people in order to be together.
What do you think all those cigarettes are about?
Absolutely. There's a lot of metaphor. They're about sexuality, and they're about people paying for their sexual desires. I want these I want to have sex so bad I'll kill a guy.
Yeah.
Like, that's what these stories are all about. And in the 50s, they couldn't really do that too confrontationally.
They couldn't show them having sex or even implied that they did.
Yeah.
Just that they wanted to.
And it's a miracle that they came out as good as they did, and they came out amazing. Body Heat manages to show the sex and still get all of that across, because one of the things that Body Heat has that a lot of other movies, a lot of other mainstream movies in particular, that have a lot of sexuality leave out or they don't understand, is it's not just sex scenes. It's about the buildup. It's about wanting to have sex. It's about thinking you can't have sex. It's about that moment when you weren't having sex, and then literally 5 seconds later you are. Like that, just like, I want to so bad. We're gonna do this.
And importantly, how good the sex is.
Yes.
It's not just that you get to have sex and there's, the sound goes off and people are throwing their heads around in slow motion and you get to see their nude bodies and it's titillating. These people are really enjoying themselves.
Yes. And the whole point of Body Heat, the plot is relatively simple, at least to start with. William Hurt plays a seedy lawyer in Florida. It's in the middle of a heat wave. He meets a rich man's wife, played by Kathleen Turner, in her film debut. Holy crap, what a good debut. This is an all-timer performance. She's amazing in this.
She is so amazing in this.
They meet. They want to have sex. They don't yet.
They flirt a lot.
And then they
she's, she looks like young Kathleen Turner. She's gorgeous, and she wears white dresses, and then she's like the spotlight's always on her.
And because it's a heat wave, everyone is constantly glistening with sweat.
And so there's sex everywhere. He goes into a bar, and there's this really fantastic scene where he sits down next to her in the bar, and all of the men look at him. And it's like, why is everybody looking at me? And she just sort of looks at him very casually, as if she's Barbara Stanwyck, and says, a lot of people have tried that stool. Like, people,
you're the only one I've let
stay on that stool. And he's like, oh, well, privileged.
And when they flirt a bit, and he says, you go back to my place, he's like, this is my local bar. People will ask questions. And so she slaps him in the face and says, how dare you? And then leaves. And then he follows her home. And then they do some making out. They do some more flirtation. And then she's like, no, we can't do this. And then she shuts the door. And then she just looks at him through the window while she's just sort of caressing herself.
And she's like, they're both painting. So they're practically having an orgasm already. Like, they're on the other sides of glass doors, and he's like looking at her. It's like, this is happening. But there's glass between us.
Yeah, he's stalking it. He's trying this door. He's trying that window. Finally, he says, screw it. And he grabs like a stool or a chair.
It's a flower pot.
He grabs a flower pot and he chucks it through the window and breaks it and climbs in. And then they just start having sex. That is a great sex scene. Not just because they're having sex and because they're young and attractive, but because they wanted to so bad. Body Heat understands that. And you're right. It is important. The sex is actually important to the story, because if the sex wasn't amazing, there was absolutely nothing
to motivate any of these characters.
No one would commit murder if we just had lousy sex and then we went home. It has to be the most torrid, satisfying love affair in history in order to justify what he's about to do.
And we get to see them post-coital situations where they're pouring ice in a bathtub to cool off, and he's talking about how they've been having sex so much he's chafing and things are really sore, and she's like, screw you, I just want more sex. Like, I can't. You run. It's that line from Futurama, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is spongy and bruised.
And then it turns out that she's married to Richard Crenna from the Rambo movies, who's good in this. He doesn't get a lot of credit for being a good actor. And he is not evil, but he's shady.
He's shady, he's up to something, and he's not a very attentive husband. And not in that sort of clueless way, just he's so busy doing shady back alley deals that he's never home.
Well, and he talks about her like she's like the little lady. Yeah. Oh, let's not talk business around her. Yeah. She won't be interested. And she's just like, yeah, that's great. I'm going to go to the bathroom. When I come back, we can talk about something interesting like pantyhose. And you can just tell she's really dissatisfied. So he's rich, but they've got a prenuptial agreement. If she leaves him, they get nothing. And he's a seedy, shitty lawyer, and they both want the money. So after a while, and they bring it up, and they're like, oh yeah, we shouldn't talk about that. That's a terrible idea. And then it's in their heads. Yeah. And then they can't stop thinking about it. And then finally it's like, screw it, let's bump them off. And then it cuts to one of the best characters in a movie like this, Mickey Rourke. As I was actually
the arsonist who doesn't give a damn.
We studied the screenplay for Body Heat in film school, and one of the things that they talked about was in the screenplay for Body Heat, they had the best, most succinct character introduction ever. When you're writing a screenplay and the character first shows up in the script, you capitalize the character's name, and that just calls attention to, this is a new character, someone we have to cast.
It's George, yeah.
Yeah, and there's usually like a little parenthetical or a hyphenate, just a quick description. Usually it's like age, body type, a little something about the vibe they give off.
George, 47, has definitely killed a crocodile.
Something like that. Yeah, exactly. You know something about George, but there's still a lot to work with. Now, you're not giving everything. You're not writing a whole paragraph. The description for Mickey Rourke's character in Body Heat was taught to us as perfect. I forget the character's name, but it was Mickey Rourke, rock and roll arsonist. Tells you everything, and that's exactly the character you get. He is a guy that William Hurt helped as a lawyer, got him. He's the reason he's free today. He owes William Hurt a favor, and the entire scene is basically Mickey Rourke showing him how this bomb works and trying to convince him not to buy a bomb.
Yeah, look,
because you're stupid.
This is not gonna look. I did the thing. You got me off. Remember, I got caught. This is not a good idea.
Someone told me, I think it was you, that when you commit a crime, there are 50 things at least that are going to get you caught, and if you're a genius, you remember 25 of them.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And sure enough, William Hurt is a fucking moron because he's thinking with his loins. And so when they decide to kill Richard Crenna, it goes really bad. Now, we're not going to ruin the ending about it.
No, and in fact, I really think you ought, if you're old enough, I think you ought to seek out and see Body Heat, because it really is one of the best noir films ever. Like, it can be included with all of the classics.
Absolutely. Top 10 material.
I call it a throwback, and I think the film I want to compare it to is actually Star Wars.
Not just because of the Lawrence Kasdan.
And not just because of Lawrence Kasdan, but maybe so, because they have a very similar approach. You watch the old Flash Gordon serials from like the 40s and 50s, and when you're a little kid, they feel big and epic, but when you watch them as an adult, they feel kind of run down and rinky-dink, kind of small, low budget, and silly.
Yeah.
And when you see Star Wars as an adult with those memories as a child, like George Lucas, you're trying to get that same thrill as an adult.
You're seeing everything you thought you were seeing as a kid, but
you're actually getting it. That's what Body Heat is doing with old noir films from the 40s. You can imagine all of the lurid, tawdry sex that's going on, but this time you actually get to see it and you understand the whole genre a little bit better as a result.
Yeah.
Star Wars and Body Heat are the same movie.
You know what? I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm totally fine. It sounds odd, but like seriously, that description is perfect, and you're absolutely right.
And because it understood that, it plays as the genuine article. Same with Star Wars. You can compare it, you can put it right next to Flash Gordon and say, this is just a good version of that. It's the same as that.
Mm-hmm. I think the difference is that the Flash Gordon stuff was made with less panache than the films that inspired Body Heat, obviously. But
the films that inspired Body Heat are also like legit classics, but they were missing that element. They were missing the sex. That's what those films were about. We're finally to the point where we can make those movies. Body Heat is the complete version of film noir.
It's fair.
And unfortunately, thanks to how like eye-catching and titillating and amazing and arousing the sex scenes were, that's kind of all that bled into the following generation. So when we get to something like Basic Instinct, they're trying to do something like Body Heat, but now the sex is the focus.
Well, now
the sex is the reason we're making these things.
Yeah.
It's not something that was put in to complete a story. It became the only reason to have the story.
It's a really crass version of Body Heat, which is...
And then Color of Night is an echo of Basic Instinct, so we're at a copy of a copy.
You can be lurid and classy at the same time, because life is sometimes lurid. People do have sex.
Yeah.
It's a thing that it's interesting to me how little sex we have in our mainstream Hollywood cinema now. I'm not saying every movie needs to have a sex scene, but sex is a part of the human existence. None of us would be here were it not for sex. People do have it. And it's interesting to me how little it impacts most of the stories that we tell in the mainstream Hollywood, whereas a movie like Body Heat or Color of Night or Basic Instinct or Fatal Instinct. Fatal Instinct is
a funny movie, actually.
It is a funny movie.
There was a spoof movie called Fatal Instinct.
Or Fatal Attraction. These are movies that were, on some level, either about sex or theoretically trying to be about sex. And we don't have a lot of those anymore, and I think that's interesting. I think we have more TV shows about it than anything else.
It was the invention of the PG-13 rating that killed it. The way to reach the 4-quadrant audience was the PG-13 rating, where you could have slightly more violence, still make these slightly more adult films, but have no sex or blood.
See, I disagree. I think it might be part of it, but for me, the thing I blame is actually video on the internet. Because I think once people started to be able to experience...
Or just home video in general.
No,
you could rewind those scenes again.
Maybe, but I think once you didn't even have to go to a video store to get erotica, I think people got less and less interested in experiencing erotica in a giant crowded room.
Well, and also performers got a lot more self-conscious about it. There was a time when an actress could, do a nude scene early on in their career, and it played in a few grindhouses in New York, and then it was gone forever.
Yeah, someday someone might rent it, but it's not going to be everywhere at the push of a button.
Even before rental was a thing, it's like an actress, oh, sure, I'll do this nude scene, whatever. My dad will never find out about this. My family will never see this. My husband will never see this. My girlfriends, boyfriends will never see this. So they could do it safely, and they could feel like it would be erased, pushed into obscurity immediately. Thanks to Mr. Skin, that compiles nude scenes, that's the reason that exists. now whatever nude scene you do is taken out of context and is just pornography. So it doesn't matter why you do a nude scene or what you're doing it for. You're going to be really hesitant because now it's going to be taken out of context and put on a porn website.
Yeah.
And you might not necessarily want to do that. And that's like, if you choose to do a nude scene, you have to understand that that's what's going to happen to your nude scene, and you have to be okay with that now. And I don't think there are many actors and actresses who are okay with that anymore.
Right. And that's fair. And that's one of the reasons.
And that's fair. That's their choice. But
absolutely.
It's taken sex out of movies in a way.
Yeah, so, and that's there's push and pull. We gained something. We lost something. We don't have as many films like Body Heat. And I think that's a bit of a shame, but I totally get it. I'm glad we have Body Heat, though. Body Heat is a brilliant motion picture. And something I really love about it, and when I rewatched it this morning, I noticed, I really love, it adds so much, and it doesn't seem like much. The heat wave adds so much. I was reading this book.
The heat wave that you mean that we're experiencing here in LA right now?
No, I mean the heat wave in the movie, because that one little bit, that one little idea, and the fact that it's in every scene. Every scene relates to it. The windows are open. There's always a fan on. People are always fanning themselves.
Somebody even says, I want to talk to you about anything but the heat. Let's not talk about the heat.
That is that really puts you in the place, because we know what it's like to be hot. So it just you're thinking about when you see all of these sweaty scenes and people are talking about how hot it is. When you recognize the environment of a hot day, you're already thinking about your flesh. You're already thinking about how sweaty you are. You're thinking about how warm it is right now. You know what it's like to be in a heat wave.
You see sweating skin and it's very tactile.
Your thought is, oh God, I wish I could just wear a Hawaiian shirt or something like that, and not this suit I'm wearing, whatever it is. I was reading this book about how to write mystery novels, and it was written by the Mystery Writers Association of America. So people like Sue Grafton had contributed to it.
Okay.
And one of the things that they talked about was exposition, and something that they said was always include the weather. Never forget to include the weather, because it puts you there.
Yeah.
It puts you in the place. If it's and there was a nice crisp breeze, I can feel it. As opposed to just it was day. Body Heat is such it really does put you in the
air smelled like the ocean farted.
It puts you in the body of its characters, not just sexually, just physically, the discomfort and comfort of it. And it's such a great motion picture, and I really want everyone to go see it. It's great.
Kathleen Turner really kind of got to riff on this role really brilliantly in The Man with Two Brains.
And Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
And Who Framed Roger Rabbit as well. But Man with Two Brains, the Carl Reiner film with Steve Martin, where she gets to play kind of a similar character with a much broader motivation. So I'm going to murder you and take your money. It's not the whole affair thing is kind of left out, but it just proves what an important presence and what a brilliant actress Kathleen Turner really is.
Absolutely.
I don't see her in movies a lot anymore. I guess she's not looking for as much work, or maybe she just can't get it. But she is dynamic and hilarious, and has one of the greatest senses of humor.
I've been meaning to revisit V.I. Warshawski. I wonder if it's better than I remember. It was supposed to be such a big deal at the time, and it just didn't make an impact. Who's really good in this movie we didn't talk about is Ted Danson.
Oh, as the best friend character.
Young Ted Danson.
Who kind of figures it out.
Yeah. He's great. He plays basically the Edward G. Robinson character from Double Indemnity, where he's best friends with a guy who makes terrible decisions because he's thinking with his loins. And he plays another attorney. And he's got all of these little quirks. He's a good friend. He's a dancer, and he dances whenever he thinks no one's looking.
There's a great scene where he's waiting to run into William Hurt on a pier, and I think it's not like a full minute, but it's a longer portion than it needs to be.
20-30 seconds.
It's a good portion where he's just sort of dancing on the pier to himself.
Yeah, that's what he does.
With a little music in his heart. And this is late in the film. We know dark stuff has already been happening, and there's a lot of talk of what's going on.
But not to Ted Danson. Ted Danson has stayed out of this moral quagmire. He's happy and no one else is.
But he senses something is up, but he's still upbeat enough to dance and be kind of a little bit more aware of himself.
Yeah. You can tell, like, this is like before Cheers. Like, this is like, you could tell Ted Danson was going to do something with his career. Yeah, he's really, really good in this. And I just want to give him a shout out because he deserves it.
We projected Body Heat at the New Beverly. And there's typically two projectionists in the booth. And my co-projectionist could not stop talking about how hot William Hurt was. Like that was her type.
I've never it's interesting. Like,
and there's a scene where the two of them are like sweating in tank tops. It's William Hurt and Mickey Rourke in the same scene wearing tank tops and sweating. And she's like, I can't stop watching this scene.
I'm so used to William Hurt. Like for me, William Hurt, I've always gravitated to his performances where he plays more of a colder, emotionally reserved, intellectual. Even something like Broadcast News, where he is playing a romantic lead. He's not passionate.
No, in fact, he's all intellect in that movie.
Yeah, he is. Or like that's what I'm used to. And so seeing him where he's like really young and really virile in this movie it should be a disconnect. I should be like, oh, I can't see him like this. He nails it. He's fantastic.
William Hurt's a really great actor, and he's really good in Body Heat.
So that's Body Heat.
I guess that's all we have to say about Body Heat. It's on Filmstruck. If you have Filmstruck, you can watch it. Yep. But it's widely available. You can see Body Heat.
And you definitely should.
Don't see Color of Night.
It's not good.
It's not good.
It's not good.
It's lurid enough to be thrilling in a bad movie night sort of way because it's long and it's crazy. So you might want to get together with friends, drink a little bit, and watch Color of Night. Yeah. But that's the only way it's going to be enjoyable.
All right, next week on Critically Acclaimed, in addition to reviewing the new films The Equalizer 2 and Unfriended Dark Web.
Late summer's a tough time.
It can be.
No, there's some good ones.
There's some good ones on the horizon, and we know it for the fact. We just can't review them yet. In addition to that, we're going to have another poll on the Schmoeville Facebook page this week. For no particular reason, all of the picks are from 2013.
It's been 5 years.
Yeah.
You probably saw movies in 2013, and that was a really good year for bad movies.
There were a lot of really bad.
Like there were a lot of good ones that year too, but there were a lot of awful films in 2013.
We picked 3 of the most notorious bad movies, or supposedly bad movies.
Not even the worst, just some of the more notorious ones.
From 2013, and your options that you can vote on at the Schmoeville ! Facebook page are After Earth, the sci-fi film directed by M. Night Shyamalan, starring Will Smith and Jaden Smith, which is basically kind of like Will Smith playing a video game where his son is the Avatar, and then, like, fighting a monster.
Fighting monsters, which are, like, hyper-evolved Earth creatures.
And they can sense your fear, man.
And they can smell fear. And the whole point of the movie is to be emotionless. And that's your triumph.
Great.
Don't feel anything, kids.
Option 2, The Lone Ranger. The ultra-expensive Ultra Failure, starring Armie Hammer and Johnny Depp as the Lone Ranger and Tonto from the director of Pirates of the Caribbean. It is long. It
feels long.
It is ill-conceived. It is, my experience, genuinely hard to watch.
My wife joined me for the press screening of this, and it was so bad, she left and had me take the bus It wasn't out of spite. She had a headache. She was, I said, please go.
That movie will exacerbate a headache.
I volunteered, but I had to take the bus home after seeing The Lone Ranger.
And lastly, the all-star comedy anthology film Movie 43, which Alonzo Duralde liked.
I thought, you know what? I saw it.
Wait, don't you don't hate it the way a lot of people do.
I don't hate it the way people do it.
I've never seen it. It would be new to me.
Okay.
But a lot of people hate this movie. So that's your other option. We will watch the winner of the poll, and we will pair it up with a classic movie, which we find similar in some way on next week's program. Now, I know you have a hard out. Are we hitting it? Do we have time for a letter?
I got to split.
He has to go. All right. Well, listen, we'll read more letters next week. We'll make a point of it. We'll catch up on some letters. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Critically Acclaimed podcast. Don't forget, you can also listen to us on our other podcast, Cancel Too Soon, over at Cancel Too Soon.
It's our thing.
It's our thing.
It's where you find your finest podcasts.
Yep, it's available on iTunes, available on Stitcher. We review TV shows that lasted only one season or less. This week, we're reviewing Vampires, a kids show about cars that are also vampires that are also teenagers.
Teenage superhero vampire cars.
Yeah. It's worse than it sounds.
And it's even worse than it sounds.
It's really, really quite bad. Don't forget, if you're only here at SK Plus or the Schmoes Now iTunes feed to listen to the various other shows on this
network.
They're all really great, and they all tackle different subjects and different aspects of the entertainment industry, or if you're just interested in the world of the schmoes, we got all that going on for you. If you haven't watched a Collider Collision, do it. It's a ton of great free entertainment. I highly recommend it. You can find our work, from original work and also from throughout the internet, at criticallyacclaimed.net. You can also support us on our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/canceled-too-soon. That's cancel with one L. In addition to bonus content, you also can, at certain tiers, make us write articles you want us to write.
Yeah, I've finally... somebody assigned me a season of TV, and I finally got through it, so that article is going to go up pretty soon.
As much as possible, we're trying to do them in the order in which they were received, and some of them take more time than others, but we're getting to all of them. And all of that will premiere at criticallyacclaimed.net, but you can sign up for that tier and get us to write your articles for you at patreon.com/cancel-too-soon. Don't forget, we're also on Twitter at CriticAcclaim. Because Critically Acclaimed was too long for Twitter. Our other show is at Cancelcast. I'm at William Bibiani.
I'm at Whitney Seibold.
And never forget, everyone's a critic.
I want to go to the midnight show. I'm sorry, what?